Okay, good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order. TJ, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epling-Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present.
Okay, thank you for being here. Welcome to our February 24th, 2025 Board of Education meeting. My name is Kelly Davis. I'm going to introduce you to the people sitting here. We have Board Member Nikki Hudson, Board Member Amber Epling-Skinner, Treasurer TJ Cusick, Superintendent Dr. Trent Bowers, Board Member Stephanie Harless, and Board Member Jennifer Best. If you're able, please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or changes? TJ, will you please call the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling-Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next on our agenda is a Auditor of State recognition. So Scott Brown is going to come up and join us and give he's the regional liaison for the Ohio Auditor of State, and he will present the district with its Auditor of State Award with distinction.
Okay, here you go. You took all my words. No. Hello, I appreciate a few minutes on your agenda this evening to celebrate a job well done. My name is Scott Brown, and I am the Auditor of State Keith Faber Central Ohio Liaison, or as the auditor would actually tell you in person, I'm your personal customer service representative. It's my honor to be here on behalf of Auditor Faber this evening to present the Auditor of State Award with distinction to the Worthington City School District. Each year, our office is responsible for conducting more than 4,200 audits out of 6,000 audits statewide. This award places your organization in a very select group, as just 4% of those audits receive this award. The Auditor of State Award is presented to local governments and school districts upon the completion of a financial audit that meet the following criteria defined as a clean audit report. The entity must file financial reports with the auditor's office by the statutory due date, without extension, on a GAAP accounting basis, and prepare a comprehensive annual financial report. The audit does not contain any findings for recovery, material citations, material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, uniform guidance finding, or other question costs, along with a host of other things, and I could read it to you now, but I won't. Because this award represents the hard work of all of Worthington's staff and employees who make every effort each day to attain accounting excellence. We'd like to recognize the board, the administration, and the finance department that have done an outstanding job watching over every dollar. What this truly means is that across your entire organization, you have the people and the processes in place that understand fiscal accountability. Specifically, we want to recognize TJ Cusick for his leadership, his professionalism, and exceptional commitment to fiscal integrity. So on behalf of Auditor Faber, I would like to present the Worthington City School District, the Auditor of State Award with distinction, and congratulations, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for being here.
Not a problem.
As Scott mentioned, I do want to say while I am up here accepting this award, it is indeed the hard work of all our support staff at our buildings, all our administrative staff that do their jobs with integrity every day, that process invoices, handle money, and do it with a high degree of integrity and accuracy. It also is the hard work of our Assistant Treasurer, Brian Cottrell, who brings up all that information and produces our financial report. We do that in-house. He's a CPA. He does that in-house. We're one of the few districts that still does that without the work of an outside accounting firm. Saves Worthington a lot of money doing that. And so, again, while I accept this award, I really don't have a lot to do with it. It is the hard work of all of them. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, TJ. I appreciate that, and proud of all of you. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to visitor comments, I think. As Vicki comes up, I'm just going to read a little message here that's, excuse me, in our policy. So the school board and the administrative staff encourage and appreciate community interest in meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed to hear the views of community members about their schools and items on the agenda. Each speaker will be asked to address the board at the visitors' podium so that the speaker's remarks may be clearly heard. The speaker should give their name and street address and limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. We are going to move on to information and proposals. Our first presentation, we're going to have Angie Adrian, our Assistant Superintendent of Academics, kick it off.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Just want to share with you, before winter break, I had the privilege of attending our ELA pilot team meeting, which was truly inspiring. So several of those pilot teachers, principals, instructional coaches are in the audience today, and we appreciate their attendance. This team of educators has demonstrated remarkable courage, collaboration, and commitment to our students. They took a bold risk by shifting instructional practices and embracing something new, all in the service of providing the best writing. And 3 exceptional classroom teachers who were integral to this pilot. They just did this presentation a little longer at our Curriculum Liaison Council evening in front of 30 parents. So I'd like to acknowledge Juliana King, Melanie Brinage, and Michelle McCourt. Under Steve's leadership, this team not only explored new curriculum possibilities, but also modeled one of the essential durable skills in our portrait of a learner, and that is being an adaptable leader. Their work, grounded in data reflection and open dialogue, has shown us that CKLA is the right choice for Worthington schools. I'm deeply grateful for their dedication and excited for you to hear more about their journey and the impact that this pilot has had on our teachers and staff. Please join me in welcoming Steve and our pilot teachers this evening.
Thank you, Angie. You're always good for my ego. President Davis, Dr. Bowers, members of the board, super excited to talk about CKLA tonight. But before we start, we have a number of our pilot teachers and our instructional coaches in the audience. Could you guys just stand real quick and be recognized? So, to set some context, when House Bill 33 hit in October of 2023, the state, we didn't know what was coming about curriculum adoption. And the state, in a lot of ways, scrambled. And I'm super proud of our work because we didn't panic, we paused, and we went slow enough to bring people along with us. And we're confident in this recommendation, and we'll get into the details of the recommendation in the pilot. But that wouldn't have been possible without our pilot teachers. So I know we have 3 of them up here, and the sooner they talk, the better this presentation goes. But I'm super grateful on behalf of the AAPL team and our administrators and all of our colleagues for the work that the pilot teachers did to inform this choice. Because it's the right choice, and we know that because you guys said so. So thank you again. Okay, so before we get into the details of CKLA, our pilot process, the wonderful feedback, and hearing from our teachers, it's important to just level set science of reading and talk about the pillars of CKLA. We don't have enough time for me to give you a full training on CKLA. I'll do it, but you don't want me to right now. So I'm just going to briefly go through. So CKLA, Amplify CKLA, Core Knowledge Language Arts. And we also have Austin Armwood in the audience, who's our Amplify rep. So we're super grateful for his support. When you talk to science of reading, and when we looked at this adoption, we looked at 2 curriculums. We had to make sure that they both aligned to the science of reading. So when we talk science of reading, it always starts with the simple view of reading. The goal is skilled readers who are literate and they can read to understand the world around them. The 2 components that we have to focus on from the moment our kids come in the door. The first one, word recognition. That's the bottom of Scarborough's rope. Being able to come to a word and know it instantly. And then language comprehension. I always say when word rec and language comp are secure, the outcome, the result, if they had a baby, it would be called reading comp. So when you open up the simple view of reading, you get to Scarborough's rope. I show this image in almost every presentation, and here's why. It's that important that we vet all of our instruction and materials through it. So at the bottom of the rope, you can see word recognition. It is anything but simple. Phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and we needed to make sure that our curriculum checked all the boxes in word rec, and CKLA absolutely did. There's two parts of CKLA: foundational skills and then knowledge strand. So at the bottom of the rope, foundational skills are the components that are taught: phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency. Now, when you get to the top of Scarborough's rope, the language processing, it's called the knowledge strand. So building vocabulary, sharing ideas, what are we learning about, background knowledge schema. When those strands braid together, we get a skilled reader. Now, in the knowledge strand, this is what I'm super excited about with CKLA. Just a quick overview. You can see the topics that are taught pre-K through 5. There's a 6-8 component of the Amplify ELA, but we're talking K-5 right now. What's super important on the knowledge strand is that the topics are aligned to scaffold and build on top of themselves. So for example, in grade 1, students will learn about animals and habitats. But in grade 3, they'll talk about animal classification. And that knowledge builds upon in grade 5, like you start talking about ecosystems of the ocean. Having a coherent scope and sequence of knowledge of topics, what our kids are learning about, is essential. When topics are a moving target, the byproduct that we don't realize a lot in public ed is we work a lot harder to build comprehension because there's no intentional design around morphology, grammar, vocabulary. CKLA, and you'll learn more from our teachers, gives us a pathway. We're allowed to veer off the pathway, but it gives us a vertical alignment that is aligned to the science of reading at the top of the rope. For too long, the science of reading has focused on the bottom of the rope, word rec. It's not just phonics. It's also language processing and what's going on neurologically in the left hemisphere of students' brains that allows them to develop schema, background knowledge, expressive, receptive vocabulary. There's an intentional design there, and CKLA is aligned to it. So I'm super excited about that component. So in 3rd through 5th grade, so K2, you have skills and you have knowledge strand. When we get to 3-5, it's integrated. So in K2, 2 components. 3-5, as the strands of the rope come together, it's more integrated, and that's how CKLA is set up. There is also a digital component that comes with this, and it's called Boost. So think Lexia Core 5, aligned to now our curriculum called Amplify Boost. That's a quick overview of the CKLA, the pillars of it, with the science of reading. We're confident that it aligns to the science of reading, which is super important to be in compliance with state legislation. So then let's take a step back and talk about our pilot process. So it started about this time last year when the legislation hit. But this school year, we had 46 classrooms that piloted one of 2 curriculums. The first one was Wit and Wisdom by Great Minds. That's the publisher. The second one, Amplify CKLA. I could give you all of the feedback, and if you want the detailed Likert scales from the 20 questions that I asked the pilot teachers to fill out, I can absolutely give that to you. But truth be told, that's super boring. Okay, so what we did in December, Angie alluded to it, we brought all of our pilot teachers into this room in December, and it's the first time that our Wit and Wisdom and our CKLA teachers were coming together. There were 3 outcomes that could have happened. The first one, which was my biggest fear, is we didn't like either, and It's going to be really hard to stand here at this moment and say to you, hey, I recommend a curriculum off the state-approved list that our teachers hated. We dodged that one. That did not happen. The second one was, hey, we love them both. And truth be told, we liked them both. But CKLA was by far the leader on the feedback. So the second outcome where we had a tie break and I was going to have to break the tie, I didn't have to do that either. We got into the room and I took all of the feedback along with our instructional coaches, and you'll see in this video in a minute, we put them up on posters all around this room. And then I had 970 comments I had to read through, and there was no way I could give our 46 teachers all those comments. It was like a phone book. So I used ChatGPT, loaded them in there and said, summarize this, give us the pros and the cons. We put the comments up there so that all of our teachers could see it. And then they walked and did a gallery walk and wrote down what they noticed and what they wondered. They hadn't seen each other's feedback up to this point. I can give you the details of that, but it'd be a lot easier to just watch the video that we put together of that process.
We're very excited about. And I know coming into tonight, my teammates and we did the CKLA, which we're very excited about. And I know coming into tonight, I was kind of new where I felt, but I'm just glad that we had the opportunity to sit and not only talk across grade level, but also hear from the other side to be able to say, here's what I was liking, here's what's missing. What was it like for you? So I was just appreciative of this, and I'm a very visual person. So having everything out like this, I think is very, very telling. And I'm glad that we're in a district that it wasn't a decision already made, because I know in some districts, their teachers were told. So I just feel very much like that we were able to make this decision and it was not taken lightly. So good job, us.
I was noticing I was having to do a lot less prep work, and there was just a lot more cohesiveness between the two areas.
The amount of opportunities that the kids have to be engaged with the learning that they're doing is amazing. When certain icons pop up on the slides, whether it's wiggle cards or large card chaining, the kids actually get excited about it, and they're like, oh, I love when we get to do large card chaining, and they're the ones that are moving the sounds that we need, swapping out the sounds that we need, and I think that just gives them so much ownership.
Now I feel like everything kind of blends together. So in our knowledge domain, we did fables and folk tales, and now in our skills, they're getting reintroduced in their readers to fables, and the kids are getting excited and saying, oh, we learned about that in our knowledge domain. So we're trying to see those connections between the two, and that's essentially our goal, is to have the two strands of the rope come together. So we feel like it's really kind of living up to that expectation.
Before, I might have been using this group of picture books for something and they were using something else. So I just felt excited that we're going to have a common resource, and I think that will just help throughout the district also, of when we're meeting with other first grade teams, common conversation. And again, it's giving all students a similar experience. So that's what I really liked.
From conference time back in October, we had parent feedback that said that they were ecstatic. We had assessments and we had the student CKLA workbooks to actually show evidence of what our students were working on. And even if the students were struggling on a skill, they were excited to see what they were working on and excited to see where they were going to be going. They were just excited to see, wow, my child is working on this, and shocked that my child is able to do this right now. So it was really, really a great conversation to have with parents.
Some kids are really good spellers. Some kids are very good at spotting the correct spelling, maybe not writing it themselves. So it was great to see some of those kids feel successful, even though they might not be as successful in one area. At least in the other two assessments that we were doing, they were really successful there. I love the fact that 1 minute we're at the carpet, then they're at their flip books, then we're back at the carpet, then they're in their books writing, and then they would get really excited when we would pull out the chapter books to read that segment of the day and couldn't wait to go to the next one. So it was always great. For me, our morning times are the best part of our day because they are engaged the entire time.
Overall, CKLA has actually allowed my EL students to connect more with the curriculum, and I'm seeing a lot of students that typically would be quiet in the back of the room, not wanting to participate, raising their hands constantly, asking for more, asking to read more to the class, and so it's very powerful.
My whole teaching philosophy is built on student relationships. Like at the end of the day, the best thing is knowing my students inside and out and just having that community time together. Getting into the program, I realized that the richness of my relationships was then built in the rigor of the curriculum. And I got to know my students so much more beyond the what's your favorite color. And we have to know that as teachers, but I just love the richness of my relationships with my students throughout this pilot program.
So Corey Carter, part of Vicky's communications team, did an outstanding job with that video. We wanted you to see the organic comments from the feedback session. Every time I watch it, I hear different themes. And I'm going to highlight those and then turn it over to our teachers to expand on them. So themes that you hear in the feedback and that we saw in the written feedback from teachers: focus on delivery over content creation, engagement and academic rigor across our student subgroups. So gifted, EL, IEP, all of our students were more engaged. Strengthening our vertical alignment, not just K-5 like you think. I'll let them expand upon that, but in multiple ways it helps us with alignment. And then a consistent learning experience for all of our students and our teachers. So with that, I am going to let Melanie, Juliana, and Michelle talk about their experience and touch more deeply on these topics.
Thank you, Steve. Like he mentioned, we're just going to take a couple different turns touching base on some of these different key things that came up in the video. First one being delivery over creation. As teachers, we've been able to take a shift in our energy from creating lessons from ground zero with just a base of standards to now having a strong, rigorous curriculum with a strong scope and sequence, and being able to take that and instead focus on how can we make this content the best it can be for our students and deliver it in a way that draws them in as learners and challenges them as thinkers as well. Before this, so you can think back with just that ground zero level, we were thinking about what book are we going to read today? Are we doing a novel study, a picture book? What standard will we touch base with this novel or book? How are we going to bring in word work, grammar, morphology, all of those pieces with not really anything to go off of, but just the creativity in our minds, which while can be very fun and enthusiastic, it can also be very, very challenging. So we've seen a cutback in our planning time and just how we can just change our way of thinking and think about what can we do to make this the very best it can be for our kids in our classrooms, and then tweak that from year to year instead of tweaking just a curriculum that we're making up on our own. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle now to go over rigor.
So one of the things that I know all of us, when we were thinking of signing up for the pilot program, were interested in was looking at that rigorous, was it a rigorous program? Were the students going to be engaged? But then most importantly, how about our subgroups? So I, like most teachers, have a diverse classroom. I have the gifted cluster in my classroom, 4 IEP students and 7 English language learners. So it was very important to me that all of my subgroups could access the curriculum. And I was very pleased to see that it hit it out of the park. So for rigor, for example, we started our year with a unit on classic tales. And right away, we read the book Wind in the Willows. We then delved into theme about friendship and hospitality. We were introduced to grammar and how to begin to diagram sentences. We then also read Alice in Wonderland, Charlotte's Web, and I'm blanking on it. You can help me over there. Aladdin. And that was all in the first 15 days. So rigorous, definitely. Student engagement, you can definitely see that they would be very engaged with all of these books and information. Kids love to learn. And what I was most happy to see was how the subgroups responded. So I expected my gifted cluster to delve into the rich content, but I was excited to see that my English language learners honestly probably benefited the most. All kids love to learn, and when they were not pulled out of the classroom during knowledge time, they were so excited. They went home, they got on the Amplify website, they wanted to know what we went into next. We're currently in space. They are very thrilled, not only engagement-wise, but they can access the curriculum. Like Melanie alluded to, because I'm not having to spend a lot of my time creating, and I have this rich, rigorous curriculum, I can then do what all teachers do best, which is work on how to help my subgroups access the curriculum. Now it is Juliana. Oh no, Melanie.
The next thing we're going to touch base on is alignment. Like Steve mentioned, this is not just K through 5. I kind of feel like this alignment reaches the entire district. The alignment he touched base on with the Scarborough's rope is obviously a big piece of it with science of reading. We have those 2 pieces of the rope and we want them to work together. Through K through 5, those pieces of the rope are doing exactly just that. I teach 5th grade, so an example for that is we touch on morphology, grammar, vocab, reading, comp, and writing all within a 90-minute class session. Our morphology that day touches base with our vocabulary. Our vocabulary can then be found in our reading, and then we can take that vocabulary and then apply it to our writing. So that's exactly what we want for these kids, is because that is where we are going to find that strong reading comprehension come into play, along with that strong word recognition. Along with that, these kids are going to be receiving common language kindergarten through 5th grade. From what I hear, we might be bringing this into Sutter Park, and we have some piloting in 6th grade taking place or middle school in general next year too, which that's going to be a value for these kids, but also I think the teachers, because the kids are going to be able to see how does their learning progress from year to year, which if you've been in a classroom, kids often say, why do I need this, or where did this come from? Maybe we can try and have an answer for that question now pretty easily. My kids, just the other day, we finished up a unit on the Renaissance, and right before we started that unit, it said, remember back to 4th grade, you did this. So they can bring in that prior knowledge and prior learning into their learning in the next grade level. And then after that, just the planning and collaboration that's happened this year has been one of my absolute favorite parts of piloting. I've been able to collaborate with teachers across the district. I'm departmentalized in my building, so there's no other 5th grade teachers piloting with me. So I've had the opportunity to spend my time after school traveling to different buildings or them traveling to me so that we can talk and touch base about things that are going well for us, things that we might want to tweak. What are you doing with that unit to make it stronger for your kids? And we can kind of piggyback off of one another. And it's really nice to have that common ground with somebody else instead of your conversation being like, I'm reading a novel study right now, they might be reading a picture book, or they might be in an entirely different standard than I am. Just being able to have that community feeling with other teachers in the district has been a really big positive. And that can go into our professional development next year. So next year when we come together, or I think we're even starting this summer with professional development for CKLA, to all be in one room knowing that we're all focusing on the exact same thing and we can take that learning to our classrooms the next day, I think is going to be a great advantage for us as a district, a community, just our building morale in general.
The thing that I'm going to touch on is a common experience for all students and teachers. I came into this year as a first-year teacher, and so a lot of people the summer before your first year, it's like, what am I going to create to set myself and my students up for success in the beginning of the year, and then continue to figure that out throughout the course of the year. But I was lucky enough to come in as a pilot teacher. So in May of last year, I came into this room and Steve said, hi, I'm Steve, and gave me all of my curriculum for the year. So it wasn't, what am I going to make? It was, how can I learn this and use it for my students? And that was such a big sigh of relief, because there's so many new things that come with your first year teaching. And to know that my students wouldn't be held to my experience creating rigorous curriculum, but instead had that already prepared for us, and it was just my job to make it accessible for them, was really cool. And it makes me excited to think about all students, no matter what school you're at in the district, no matter the experience level of your teacher, that they're all going to have that same experience available to them. So students are no longer, that experience is now a lot more accessible for kids. And what's been great is with the rigor of the curriculum and all of our subgroups, we're exposing kids to a lot of topics that they might not grasp for, like reach for right away. So in 5th grade, I'm a 5th grade teacher. We read The Adventures of Don Quixote. We studied the Renaissance. Right now we're in the Reformation. And when we first say these words to students, like, what is the Reformation? What is the Renaissance? They know about the Ninja Turtles, but they don't know how they got their names, right? But it's been so cool because they start off like, what's that? And then throughout the course of the unit, we have a long list of questions where they want to dive deeper and they want to know even more. So it's been really cool to see that kids can do really hard things. We just have to open it up to them. So that's been really exciting for all students to have that opportunity too.
I knew we were onto something. So you have year 1,
Yeah.
30 plus in year 4. I knew we were onto something when it was meeting the needs of all the teachers. I also knew when I visited Slate Hill, and I didn't anticipate this, for the 3rd grade team at Slate Hill to say, Steve, my EL kids have never been more engaged. And then in the same breath say, and my gifted kids have never been more challenged. I didn't anticipate that in the feedback. I hope that we would have student engagement with all of our subgroups, but to hear it from our teachers, and then when I really knew that CKLA was going to lead well before December, when I brought all the pilot teachers, is when I visited a Wit and Wisdom classroom. In 10 minutes into it, they told me everything they liked, and then they said, can we just stop? We really want CKLA. So we make this recommendation with the board with a careful process with our teachers, our administrators, our AAPL team, our state supporting it. And we really believe it's not a condemnation on current practice, but it is a step forward for our kids, our teachers, our buildings, and our community. Super excited to bring it to your attention and to thank you for your support with the pilot process. It was a big process, and it started with you guys approving it. At this point, we'll stop and open it up for questions.
Well, I just want to say thank you first. That was a great presentation. And so I'm excited to listen to all my colleagues' questions. And then if there are anything left, then of course I'll ask you a question. But I'll open it up to the board to ask if anyone has a question for this team or anyone else in the room.
We have seen this a couple times through AAPL, so why don't you guys go ahead and ask and then.
Thank you. Thank you all for the investment, for the thorough presentation. Very excited for to learn about the experience and the process. I have one kind of fundamental questions regarding the process, and that is, how long do we as a district typically pilot a change in curriculum to get a sense for whether or not it's a viable option?
Gosh, I wish I knew the answer to that. I know that Kelly with social studies and Brian Genius with science, they did year long. I don't think as many teachers were involved. Yeah. I really wanted to expand this because it was going to impact every person in 11 elementaries, all of them. And I knew it was a very important decision. And quite honestly, I wasn't going to make the call alone. I feel like I have a lot of expertise in this area.
Of course you do.
But
you can own that.
But you can see why I wanted the teachers involved. They can speak to it. They can experience it. They are much more CKLA experts than I am, and they will continue to grow because they're teaching it on a daily basis.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Makes sense. 2 follow-up questions. Several of you mentioned you focused on delivery versus creation. So does that mean like the time that it's spent to understand the curriculum and then deliver it was less than you would have normally been spending and creating? Does that make sense? Am I asking that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think less time was spent. I think just our mindset and how we were planning shift. So we're still spending a good chunk of time planning content for our students, but instead of spending, I just think back to when I would sit and think about like, what book am I going to read? What chapter book do I want to use for a novel study? That in itself would stump me for hours. And then from there, I would have to decide, okay, what standard am I hitting? And then what am I going to do to teach that standard? And like, how am I going to assess the kids? All of those pieces. For me personally, and I'm a perfectionist, so I hang on to stuff for a really long time. But I am not doing that anymore because I know the curriculum that I've been given is super strong and has the rigor that my students need. So instead I can know, like, okay, I'm teaching about the Renaissance today. This is my assessment. These are the standards I'm hitting. What within this lesson do I need to change or tweak for my kids so that it engages them, one, to the very best of my ability, buys in their attention for their learning, and just making sure that I'm providing them with a fun, engaging class that is giving them everything that they need. So same amount of time, different mindset.
Okay, that's helpful. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, Nikki, so here's one of the most stressful days for me was new teacher orientation, when I could give teachers our standards, which are really outcomes in ELA. They're just outcomes. They're not pathways there. And I could give them foundations, which was our version of the skills strand. But then I would say to them, collaborate with your colleagues in the building. Now I can say, hey, the science of reading, here's your skills strand. We've been doing great at the bottom of the rope for years. But the top of the rope, the reason I went back to this slide, it's about language processing and development. And when topics are a moving target, and they become that when we ask teachers to curate content or just grab books, when topics are a moving target, you give up a lot on the language processing side. And if you take that back to the simple view of reading, that's 50% of the equation where we didn't have an intentional design.
Okay.
And we have really good content curators in the district. We really do. But if you look at it and say, okay, what's your plan for morphology? Well, not too many people can articulate that, nor should they. There's a plan in CKLA. What's your explicit plan for expressive and receptive vocabulary development? I don't know. That's now been answered with CKLA. So when we talk about science of reading at the top of the rope, you're looking at it in graphic format here.
Well, and the plan, that makes complete sense. And the plan spans different grades. So it would have been very difficult for that plan to have been isolated with a particular teacher in a particular grade and actually have the same impact as what you're showing here across different grades.
So you have that alignment. And then what I really like is it offers a great opportunity for us for the inter-district collaboration because they have a common platform. Sometimes they would get together. So the next most stressful day for me is the day after election day, not because of the results of elections, but because teachers get together and sometimes they're like, I didn't know that they were doing that over there. Should we be doing that? And I field those questions. Now we have a common pathway. It's not a rigid script. It still lets you get off the pathway, but common vision, mutual path forward, which is exciting for the opportunities for us to hone our craft around a common experience.
That's excellent.
Yep.
I feel like I'm hogging the microphone. I promise this is the last one. How much of it is online versus tangible? And does that vary? You guys mentioned a website that's accessible. You mentioned a couple other things like cards or different things that were coming up that I think it was the video that said kids were getting excited about different aspects of it. So just how much of it is electronic or online?
I can kind of talk a little bit to that. There's a component called Boost that they talked about that really takes the place of our Lexia, just in the fact that it's computer based, where the kids may be on it, 10 or so minutes a day or every other day. But as far as online, when I do so third grade is different than K through 2 when it's skills based or even at 5. But when I do my knowledge domain, I start with like a speaking and listening, and up on the screen, I have slides that are prepared for me, but I can also edit. So I can edit the slides that have vocabulary. And what I've done is gone in knowing about my EL population and taken the vocabulary words for the day and added pictures to them. So that's very nice that I can actually do that. They can listen to me, but they can also see on the screen the vocabulary, the pictures, and then a big picture of whatever it is I'm talking about. I can then also embed slides in there with check-in questions. So for example, today we were introducing the solar system unit. We started out with our learning targets that they can physically see online, pictures of the vocabulary that I would be introducing in my speaking and listening, and then pictures of, check-in questions along the way. But then we go back to our seats for the readers, where kids are actually in a physical book. And with that reader, I have a choice, and it varies on the week. I can do a whole group reading, especially for the introduction. But then on another day, I can have some kids partner pair to reread, and I'm pulling a small group, while maybe a small group is also digitally online listening to the same chapter. So it allows me to change, and it kind of goes back to what Melanie was talking about. I can not necessarily look at my curriculum, although some of it I really have to reteach myself because it is pretty in-depth. But I can also go and say, how can I better deliver that to the students? So.
And obviously meet them where they are, given all of those different tools that you have.
Absolutely.
That's
Right.
fantastic.
Add something to that too. One of the really cool things about the online platform is that they have a library and they have all of our readers translated into different languages. So when we think about our EL students and our Spanish-speaking students, I'm not having to figure out, okay, Google Translate, let me take a picture of every page and try to translate it. It's on there in their native language, and there's an audio version of that as well, which has been a great resource. And the online slides, they have all of our workbook pages are embedded in there as well. So on certain pages where it might be better to have students type, they can do that. Or I have some students who just based on different accommodations, typing is better for them. And so again, I'm not creating the worksheet for them based on what's on paper, but it's already there. And you can even set up your screen so that it's students are linked with you. And so whatever slide I'm on, they're on too, if they were to do it online, which has been really great.
That's excellent. Incredibly helpful. Thank you very, very much. I'm excited for everyone in the district. I can understand why you were excited, Steve. Thank you.
Those were good. Thank you. Thank you. Amber?
I feel like we could talk about this for just hours and hours and hours. Very fascinating presentation. Just one observation, when you're talking about the process that you all went through, the inclusive and collaborative nature to get you all together and how exciting that was. Like, if only we had, the time to do that with all major decisions. I mean, it's incredible that you all had that opportunity to really dig into this. I don't really have any questions. I just, think it's great. I guess I would be curious, in the short amount of time that you've been using this, have you seen just on the student by student basis, just a love for reading just flourish in students that you never witnessed that in before? Have you? You're all three nodding for anyone who's watching on the web stream. So yes, that's emphatic. Okay, that's great to hear. Thank you.
And I'll add, the curriculum is hard, but our students don't shy away from it. They engaged with it. And we're super excited about that from an achievement and growth standpoint.
I love that. Thank you, Amber. Jennifer, Stephanie, do you have anything additional or anything you want to add?
Yeah, I have a couple things. Yeah. So I have had the pleasure of watching this unfold because my first grader is in a CKLK classroom. And she approaches life with a healthy dose of skepticism in all things. And Ms. Devine can attest to that. It took her half a year to just, talk to people. But this kid is coming home now today. She said, "Hey, Mom, we're learning about the layers of the earth." And she starts going on and on and on. And she's like, "What's that stuff called? It comes out when it's at the surface, it's lava, but what is it when it's in the core?" And I was like, "Magma?" That, and she keeps going. This is, so just, I can attest to what this is doing for her, and I know that's anecdotal, but I'm really excited about the opportunity for this. And we have seen this at CLC. Steve and I have talked about it, so I've kind of been aware that it's coming. But what I was going to do is bring a couple questions forward that the parents asked at the CLC meeting, because I thought it would be beneficial for everyone to kind of hear those questions. So some of them we've already covered, but one of the questions that a parent asked was just around diversity and representation in these texts, because some of them are nonfiction and it's new curriculum. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we did the AAPL, Rob Messenheimer and I looked at a lot of curriculum that was on the state list. And so we had vetted before we got to this process on important things. One, is it on the list? Is it aligned to the science of reading? Are kids going to grow and achieve And does it meet diversity, equity, and inclusion important criteria? A lot of diverse, different types of text that the teachers can talk to, nonfiction, fiction, science and social studies are embedded in there. So you have the cross-curricular component, poetry, long reads, short reads, things that are important for all types of kids. Think about the child who might have a tough time getting to school or a truancy issue. If they get lost in a chapter book, they're lost for a long time. So you have to have short reads, things like that. Making sure that our authors were diverse. Is every student, do they see themselves in our literature? We were confident with that, with talking with Austin and CKLA, talked to other districts that had used CKLA. And then for me, the most important was when Toya looked at it and emphatically said, I love this. So that meant a lot to me. And some of the books she uses in her Miss Toya Reads program. So I think we're in a really good spot there.
Okay, thanks. And then we've kind of talked around this a little bit, but a parent specifically asked about how teachers still have agency within a curriculum like this. And so maybe we could talk about that just a little bit, because we have amazing teachers in the district. I just want to.
Right. You guys talked about the agency. You were using it, right? Yeah. Here's the question. Do you feel like you're reading from a script or reading?
Great question. And I will be honest, I feared that going into this. I actually started some of this work with Steve 2 years ago, and that was my biggest, no, I don't want to do it. My coach is sitting in the audience, and I literally called her one day and was like, no thanks, I'm good. I could not get myself to read from a script every day or just feel like I was acting in front of the kids. And while it is there for you and is scripted if you need it to be, and I've used it as that for subs or when I bring other people in who want to look at it, that is what I show them. But I also tell them to not fear that you can't go away from the script. And I would say the first month or two, you do really need your guidebook right by you at all times, because you need to make sure that you're hitting all the points. But I've gotten to a point where that guidebook stays at my desk and I just know what I'm going to do that day. I know what I need to touch on. And that's kind of where we're talking about that delivery piece too, is we have the option to add in think routines that aren't necessarily in the CKLA guidebook, but things that we've learned at professional development or from other teachers or from coaches to add in that little bit of spice to the lesson of how can I make it better for my kids? So while it is scripted, you do not have to follow it like that, if that makes sense, if that answers your question.
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can just add on just a little bit in third, because I know each grade level is different. So in third grade, we do have a speaking and listening, and it is scripted. So the speaking and listening is scripted. But the nice thing, I think, as one of my colleagues was saying, is that every student in Worthington City Schools is going to get that knowledge. But they add in pause days, which are wonderful. So on the pause days, they do give you items that you can kind of choose from, but you can, if you have a favorite book or a favorite activity, you can bring those in. There's 2 to 3 pause days. So for example, with the Classic Tales unit, I know some of my teams and my favorite books were Martina, the Beautiful Cockroach, was a classic tale from Cuba, Mufara's Beautiful Daughters, a classic tale from Africa. So we were able to bring in some of the things that we've done before and add those to our curriculum.
Thank you. I similarly could nerd out about this for a really long time, so I'm going to rein it in. But I do want to thank all of you and thank all of the pilot teachers and everybody that was involved with this, because it is not always the case when we have something that is state mandated that everybody can embrace, that we feel like is going to be a value add, that, this is amazing. It's a big deal. So thank you all for all of your hard work.
Stephanie, you bring up a good point. We had the legislation, but we said from the jump at our staff meetings, we didn't hide behind it. We were headed this direction anyway. The legislation just put lines on the red for it. It honestly, you don't hear this very often, helped us a little bit.
Okay, once again, thank you all for being here. The 3 teachers that are here when we were at Curriculum Liaison Council last week actually did a lesson for us. And I'll first say it wasn't scripted. They were very, genuine in their lesson. I didn't feel at all scripted since that had come up. But it was so engaging because we were at our table, and then we were at a different table, and then we listened to them read, and then we got up and we stood on the other side of the room, and it was just constant interaction and different questions. So easy for the kids to stay engaged. So, and I noticed last week when I watched the video that my niece-in-law was one of the teachers that did this. So I, of course, had to text her right away. How'd it go? Well, loved it. And basically all the same comments you have all made. But the one thing she said that I haven't heard, but I'll say it because one of your trainers is here. She said the trainers were incredibly helpful and nice and great to work with. So that part was really good. So
I'm glad you brought that up. I watched that really close. From my seat, I let both publishers lead the way because I knew that myself, an instructional team, and our principals in a district this size, we were going to need a partner in the work. And Amplify, they were readily available. And we've all been in the professional development when you know within 10 minutes this person has read the manual, but they've never taught the manual. We never felt that way. But then I was even skeptical there because I knew Austin, he'd give me his best, right? He wants to make the sale, don't forget. So, but we had a coaching day where 6 more trainers came and they were equally as impressive. Our preschool is going to pilot the preschool version of this at Sutter Park. She was impressive. And then we mentioned there's a 6-8 version that we're going to look at next year in a pilot. I don't know if we'll go that direction, 6 through 8. It's a completely different landscape in our middle levels, but it made sense amongst other reasons to at least consider what our elementary experience is going to be like and what our teachers were so excited about. Emily Greenwald, after me going to Slate with us, we were in the parking lot. I didn't hit the pavement for 2 seconds. And she says, why aren't we looking at this at our middles? And that's like, well, we can. And that's what we're going to do. We have about 12 pilot teachers that are going to look across our 5 middles next year at Amplify 6-8 ELA. So
great. Well, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
I don't have a lot to add. I have one question, but I love this collaboration. Excuse me. And your enthusiasm, because I can tell that you own it, right? And your students I can feel it, so I know that your students feel that same, and the teachers that are out here and the instructional coaches, that they feel it too. And so I really appreciate that, and I think that will resonate with our students a great deal. I have way too many notes here, but my one question, so many things you said. There was examples of how you utilize this curriculum with your subgroups. And so that was one of my questions, was that give an example of that, and you did that. So that was very helpful to know that information. And also that it allows for you to have some creativity, that it's not just like the Charlie Brown teacher, right, reading from a script. And so that you have some guidance, which I think, and some structure, which I know I always need, but then you can add your own pizzazz to it. And for your audience, which is your classroom, that you can make sure that it's landing with them as well. So I hear that from all of you, and I just appreciate your time today. The one question I do have is about, 25-26 school year, if we're looking to implement it in all of the elementary schools, do you take this team, and does this team then mentor the other teachers who have not yet piloted the program? Does that make sense?
yes.
Okay.
And more. So right now, I'm in the middle of going to staff meetings, just giving them a similar update so they can hear, they watch the video. But really, it's about letting our colleagues know, here's our implementation plan going forward. And that starts in May. Rob, Kelly, myself, building principals, under Angie's leadership, we're looking at, okay, how CKLA is a good idea, but without a good implementation plan, it'll become a bad idea really fast. It'll become a bad idea really fast. So we're articulating the details, Kelly, of those plans to our teachers.
Okay.
Training will start in May. Not a single K-5 teacher will leave without the basic launch. They call it launch training. There'll be opportunities through the summer, through our 3 Thursdays with Worth U. And then when we come back in the fall, there'll be additional 6-hour trainings Election Day will be dedicated to CKLA. And then we have the coaching sessions that are available through Amplify. So multiple opportunities for our teachers who have not piloted to have the professional development. And honestly, where that design came from, part of the feedback from our pilot teachers were, what do we need to know to scale this next year? And they gave us a ton of comments and we listened to them. There's going to be committees this year with our pilot teachers. There's more in changes in assessment calendars, changes in our progress report, and then the collaboration with Amplify. So we feel like we're in a good space. Now, this is what I know what's going to happen. We have evangelists for CKLA in a lot of buildings. Our teachers are going to run to our pilot teachers and say, hey, did you run into this difficulty? And they'll say yes. And this is what we did. So that's going to be nice for them to do that.
That's all I have. Thank you so much for this time, this presentation, your enthusiasm. Just so grateful that you all are here for our students. I see some principals in the audience. I love that. So just thank you for the time. And I know that we can call you if we want that further description because you're super excited, as you said.
Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, are you going to the podium? Okay. We are moving on to our next agenda item for responsible staffing plan. Those of you that were here for CKLA, you're welcome to stay, or if you have to leave, we understand that too. But Dr. Bowers is going to give a presentation about the responsible staffing plan.
Well, good evening. So thank you, first of all, for taking time to really dig into CKLA. What's fun from our Board of Education standpoint, or at least from our administrative standpoint about our Board of Education, is that you do care deeply about teaching and learning. And it comes across when our teachers are up here talking. We are an organization, obviously our mission is to empower a community of learners who will change the world, but we do that through teaching and learning and through student growth. And we believe that CKLA is going to help that happen and significantly, K-5, a massive change for us. And I really appreciate Steve and Angie and our teacher after teacher after teacher after teacher who's really digging into this work. And it's fun to see their face light up, right? Like you saw that tonight. I think we're seeing that district-wide. And then I think when teachers are that excited, it's inevitable that there's an impact on every one of our kids because there's nothing more important than teachers in the classroom. So with that in mind, we're transitioning to talk about what's called a responsible staffing plan. And so what we're attempting to do is take a strategic approach to our staffing from now through our 5-year forecast. So it says through November of 2028 on here. And why is this necessary? Well, we know that over the past decade, our community has made a really significant investment in supporting our schools through property taxes, right? We saw that with the passage of our operating levy and bond issue in 2028. And then we saw, again, our community show incredible support for Worthington schools in 2022 with the passage of our operating levy, our bond issue, and our permanent improvement issue. And I think we've seen benefit from that. Our kids are seeing benefit. You've seen revamped middle schools. We're obviously seeing rebuilt high schools right now. So there's real long-term impact, but it's been a big ask of our community. So that's been significant. Secondly, historically, when we think about the 2028 or the 2018 and the 2022 operating levies, we've asked for about 2.25 mils of taxation per year. So that's been expressed as 8.9 mils, hoping to last for at least 4 years, but about 2.25 mils per year. So we believe that's about the rate that our community can support. It's a sacrifice, but we believe that that's about that point. And in November, when we looked at our 5-year forecast and the board adopted the 5-year forecast, my feeling was that the board aligned that we wanted to be able to stretch our operating dollars longer than what was originally projected. So originally in 2022, we said, we need you to pass this operating levy and we're going to make it last 4 years. And that would put us back on the ballot in 2026. And what we said in November was, what we really want to try to stretch those dollars, hopefully out till November of 2028. We want to make those dollars last. And we believe we can do that, but we do believe that that happens through a responsible staffing plan. And the reason for that is a school district is much like a hospital. We are a service industry. We hire staff members to serve kids. So 80 to 85% of our budget is simply salary and benefit of employees because our staff members serve kids. That's what we do. The other 15% of our budget is pretty fixed costs. They're not very exciting things. We have an electric bill, we have a gas bill, we have an internet bill and a water bill, and we buy paper and we buy curriculum materials. But there's not a lot of flex there. The number one driver of cost is employee cost, and it should be. We don't shy away from that because that's what we do as a service industry. But if we want to stretch our dollars, that means the only real place that you can make significant impact is by looking at staffing, okay? So our responsible staffing plan is designed to mirror student enrollment. So if you look at the screen, somewhat hard to see, but in 2020, we had 10,630 students in Worthington schools, 1,254 staff members. This year in 2025, we are up to 10,751 students. So we've gained 121 students during that 5-year period. So by the way, what that tells us is we had significant growth for about a decade, and now we're growing, but just a little bit each year. So we've kind of leveled that growth off from what was explosive growth the decade before that. But from 2020 to 2025, while we added 121 students, we added 90 staff members. Not all of those are teachers, right? We added teaching staff, we added support staff, and we actually feel really good about those, what we believe were strategic additions to meet a critical need at this time. So if we think about 2020 and we think about COVID and what kids went through and what education has looked like post-COVID, I believe our response of adding student supports was something that is defendable and important and something we should be really proud of. But at the same time, as we look forward, we have a new enrollment report, and that is on our website. It's on the front page of the website. Anybody that wants to dig in, the 125 to 180 pages of enrollment data. But what it projects is that over the next 5 years, we're going to see about the same level of enrollment that we have right now. We might see a little bit of increase, we might see a little bit of decrease, but unless there's some sort of shift in housing, which isn't projected in the near term, then our enrollment should be pretty flat over the next 5 years. Now, when I say enrollment, I'm talking about our district level enrollment. So overall enrollment. Now remember, we have 21 buildings. So that means some buildings may be up, some buildings could be down, right? Enrollment never, works out perfectly across the board, but overall it should be about a 5-year split. Now, not part of this plan, but the enrollment report, if you dig into the data, does show that they think the next 5 years we could actually see a slight decrease of enrollment. As families moved in, their kids are moving through the system, there's not a lot of housing turnover in Worthington, and so again, without a lot of housing growth, we could see in the 5 years following the first 5 years, we could see a little bit of decline. Nothing significant, but a little bit. But the plan here, so first of all, these are our current numbers. 836-ish teachers. We work in points, so 835.90. There are no 0.9 people, but there are positions that don't add up to 1.0, so that's how we get points. Our support staff has 449.94, so 445 support staff members, 58 administrators in the school district. This is what our current staffing looks like in Worthington schools. Over the past 4 years, enrollment has grown by less than 1%, but our staffing grew by about 7%. Again, we're proud of that. I think that was the right response post-COVID to help kids. But what we do think we need to do moving forward is maintain our current level of support. Okay, so we made this significant investment from 2020 to 2025. We want to maintain that. But we do believe that we've kind of hit a point where we need to limit any more staffing growth to only when there's enrollment growth. So if we see more enrollment than what was projected in the enrollment report, we would add staff to meet that need. But if we don't see more enrollment, we would say right here is about where we believe we need to be from a staffing level, because we've made these significant enhancements over the past 5 years. And to stretch these dollars, we need to maintain where we are. Now if we do this, pending state budgets throughout that process, but if we do this, that should align our spending with that historical tax support, right? So it should allow us to stretch our levy, so to move from a 4-year levy to a 6-year levy, and move us to that 2.25-ish range that we want to be at. So the provisions of the responsible staffing plan would say no new net hires unless we see enrollment growth. But if enrollment remains flat, we believe we have the staff we need. But there would be staffing adjustments. So that means therefore there will be times where a teacher needs to move from one school to another school, or an elementary, we might see a dip of enrollment at the elementary and we need to move some staff to the middle school, or from middle school to the high school. It also means that we need to continue to evolve and meet the needs of our kids, which means 5 years from now, even if we have 800 and whatever the number was, 85 teachers in Worthington schools, they all shouldn't be doing the same things. They should be meeting the needs that our kids have today, not the needs they used to have. So there's going to be times where we have to say, hey, we need this right now. How do we adjust what we're doing? How do we give up something else so that we can get what's needed now? And that process should continue to evolve. But that's what we mean by staffing adjustments. Okay, so it shouldn't be static, but the overall number should be right about where we are. Now, what are exceptions to this? Well, there could be exceptions from federal funding. So this year we had more title dollars than we had expected to have. We were going to utilize that for a staff member to fill that need. Hopefully those types of things would continue. Obviously lots of conversation about federal dollars right now. We did commit to adding all-day kindergarten. So we haven't factored that into, we're going to make this all-day kindergarten addition. We don't know for sure the number of staff members that will be needed because we don't know for sure what our kindergarten enrollment is yet, right? We projected that could be 3 to 5 staff members. If enrollment looked like it did this year, we'll know by August what that is. But we've made that commitment. We obviously are adding those all-day kindergarten staff members. But otherwise, we believe that the responsible thing to do is to make sure that we tie our staffing additions only to new enrollment at this point, so that we can stretch our community dollars to that, hopefully that 2028 level, and be at a historical tax support, or a level that we believe our community has supported in previous levies. So I believe that makes sense. It will be more difficult to do than when we talk about it. But we believe that, I guess what we would be doing tonight is asking for the board's support to support that responsible staffing plan that allows us, hopefully, to stretch those community dollars to 2028. So with that, I'm happy to take questions if you have them.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. From the podium. Does anyone have any questions? Amber, go ahead. Oh, go for it.
Do we have openings right now, whether the teacher level or administrative level? So then those wouldn't be filled with this plan?
No, they would be filled. So
They're factored in with the numbers?
yes. So it's an interesting question. So we know, so you have already as a board approved some retirements for next year or resignations. Those people are still in the classroom right now. They'll finish this school year, but some of those jobs are posted. We're actively interviewing for them for next year. So our plan would be to evaluate every time we have an opening, to evaluate, is this the right position? Do we continue to need that service? And do we continue to need it at this school? And we'll continue to make those evaluations. But we do plan to fill jobs or fill positions as we want to maintain the support that we have right now.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Simplistically speaking, I feel like what you're asking us to do is for us to all align and hold hands and agree that we are staffed to meet the needs of our district right now. And that we are going to do our very best to continue to do that with the staff that we have, barring any unforeseen great needs that may be, a plot of land gets developed or whatever, rapidly developed, right? And we have a rapid enrollment enhancement or increase. So for a number of reasons. One, because that's the responsible thing to do, and that's what we always try to do. And two, we want to attempt to stretch this levy from 4 to 6, acknowledging that, we have additional buildings that need attention in our community as well. And so we're not just talking about a levy, we're talking about potential additional bonds in the future, because we've now, we'll have addressed middle and high school, but we still have a plethora of elementary schools. So if you're shaking your head all of that, and I know that's hard because, because there are always needs, but additional needs. But if we can agree to do our very best with what we have right now for the bigger picture, I'm aligned and appreciate you being candid about what it's going to take to get us from that 4 to 6 year stretch. So
Yes, thank you. And I think you captured, our thinking, which is, when I get to talk with school principals, I do remind, every school principal we have could say, if we had this, it would really help. And that's 100% true. None of them are wrong. That's 1,000% the case. But it is the challenge with resource-constrained environments. And when you're working in the public sector, it's always going to be a resource-constrained environment in some way. And we do believe, I don't know if I can say that we have everything we need or any of those types of things, but we do believe we made this significant jump in investment in staffing from 2020 to 2025. And that makes us say that, hey, we are at an enhanced level of support, significantly different than what we were pre-2020. And we feel like this is the place we need to be. And it really is the only path if we want to be able to stretch our dollars.
yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Sorry, I was making a note. Jennifer or Stephanie, do you have something to ask?
I have one question. I was just going to say a couple things. I first want to acknowledge that we are very fortunate to have been in the position to create a situation where we have enhanced support. And I'm very thankful to be in a district that has supported that for us and for our kids, because it's not the case everywhere. So I just want to acknowledge that. But at the same time, acknowledge that property taxes are a burden. I mean, we all live here for everybody in the community. And so I completely support this. Obviously, it's we as a board met at our planning session, and one of the goals that we're working towards is fiscal responsibility. So this obviously dovetails directly into that. It's important to everybody, to a person that's sitting at this table. So certainly, some of this will be difficult, and it, like as you said, as we get down into the weeds, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and we'll be asking things of teachers and administrators that we haven't asked for a while. And so it is important to acknowledge that. But I guess my only question is, as I think about what that looks like, and again with my full support, when we do ask teachers to take on new things, as we talked about earlier, moving to a new curriculum, there's professional development or, extra work involved. And so is that something that we have the capacity to support for those teachers?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I still think we're in a really good position in Worthington schools. We just want to remain in that position. So when we look at the responsible staffing plan, again, first of all, we're not talking about making any reductions. We should be able to continue our professional learning with our teachers, the continual evaluation and adoption of resources. We have budgeted for and are in a good position to continue to do all of those things. But this helps us stay in that spot.
Okay, thank you.
I do appreciate the fact that we're in a good spot and we've been able to add the help we need for the kids that need it. But I really appreciate you working on this and looking at the numbers and calculating, what it would take to get to that 2.25 mils, which I think the community understands and supports. So I think we'll all be very supportive of this, knowing that there are going to be difficult decisions as we go. But thank you for doing this.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It makes sense to me, it's very clear. I understand aligning our strategy with enrollment. And my only question is, our enrollment numbers, but pockets of that enrollment number shifts. So we're having an increase in EL students, for example. And with that, do you feel comfortable that we can make shifts within the enhanced support that we have now currently as pockets of our population changes?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely I do. But that is where the difficulty will lie, right? I mean, that may mean we don't fill a current regular ed position one place when it opens, so that we can add, I'll use the example of EL support or a special education support, or, right? I mean, that's where we have to evaluate every position as they come open.
Okay.
And in a school district of 21 schools, again, the challenge becomes if I'm a teacher or a parent in a school, I see my school and my need. And sometimes we say at a district level, I need to shift that over here. And that's hard because that's abstract. I can see what I'm losing, or, it might be a person. But I think that's the right work. I mean, we should not have the same positions we have 5 years from now. That would not be responsible. We should have what our kids need, and what that looks like. But we do think the overall number should be about where it is right now.
Okay. And just the other example, and we talked about this with the 5-year forecast, because our enrollment numbers are kind of plateauing. So in the elementary level, we're not seeing as many enrollments there. But the bulk of our elementary students that are heading into middle school, so our middle school numbers will increase. And so we could possibly see some shift in staff from the elementary to the middle school level.
Yeah, we could, or you could see some staff from middle school to middle school, because our 4 middle schools, 5 middle schools, but Phoenix is a static number. The 5 middle schools kind of grow and ebb and, at different levels. So you certainly could see a teacher need to move from one middle school to another. We have continued to balance our high schools, and we've had some staff members move from one high school to another. You could see more of that for sure this coming school year.
Okay. I do appreciate you, and I know that you and TJ both work very closely together, and obviously all of our administration. to make this work. And so I appreciate, and you have support from me. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Any final questions, given that information? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bowers.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move on to the first reading of the Neola policy. I'm going to turn it over to our policy committee, Nikki Hudson and Stephanie Harless.
Thank you. I wanted to start, if you're okay, Stephanie, by just calling out a few things on the status recommendation on a few of these that are actually not correct. So I apologize that we didn't catch that before it went out. 171, it says we would adopt the policy rescission, so basically rescind the policy, but we don't need to do that because we don't have that policy. Right. So just correct the status recommendation to basically say it's NA, like we don't have it. Yep. 243002, it says we don't have this policy, so no action is needed at this time. We actually do have that policy. So my recommendation is just that it's not time sensitive. We obviously will always follow the law. There are certain things we choose to put into policy, but that we as a policy committee can address this one at our next policy meeting.
Actually,
go ahead.
I think in going back through and looking at this, we do have it, but I think when we adopt 2431 or adopt the new language in 2431,
we don't
it
need
makes 243002 redundant.
Perfect, that's great.
So we can
change
rescind
that.
it.
Great.
Because 2431 covers it.
Thought it was in there somewhere, but I wasn't sure where it was in, so thank you.
Just to kind of to put a finer point on that, if you guys look at 243002 next to 2431, I'll give you a moment. Page 1 of 243002, there is the optional language, the superintendent may grant any home educated student, ... And if you look at page 2 of 5, on 2431, that language is mirrored here. And so that's where we decided we didn't need to gum up our policies with 2.
Thank you. And then the only additional, did you have anything else on those first 2 pages, Stephanie,
no.
on the status recommendations?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, then the only other one that I had was 7421. It indicates table this policy for now, and our recommendation actually coming out of the policy committee meeting was just that we don't have that policy and we would not adopt the policy.
Yeah, which one was that? Sorry, Nikki.
That is 7421 on the 3rd page.
That's correct. Yes,
Great.
it should
Okay.
not be table.
So not table, just not adopt.
We do not currently have
Correct,
it.
we don't have it, so we would not add any revisions or adopt anything along those lines. So I wanted to start with that, and then I personally have some additional comments to make regarding 5223, release time for religious instruction, just based upon listening to other boards in our area talk about in Ohio, talk about the adoption of this policy. But I'm going to pause and we can open it up if there are any specific policies that people had questions about or wanted to talk about in detail.
Can I just ask a couple quick questions before we get to that one, which might take a little more time?
Yep.
On the first page of the summary, 2340, the field trips, that the Senate Bill 104 is effective February 25th, which is tomorrow, but we tabled the policy. So do we have the policy already, or?
Obviously we'll continue to follow state law. And I think that if I am correct, let me pull that up.
Oh, here we go. Found it. I think that we are tabling it because we don't No, we do currently have the policy.
We do currently have it. There's nothing in the policy that's contrary to the law.
Okay, that we have a
Correct.
policy.
Right. Yes.
And
And
it
there's a-
follows the law.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes
So then
sense.
do we need to table it or do we need to not accept, we don't need to update it?
I think that we were doing that because we were waiting to see also what
There's
happened.
additional
with-
legislation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that makes sense.
we'll do it all at once.
But Jennifer, to clarify, like what Nikki said, we will follow the law.
Yeah.
Right, and
And there's
we do
nothing in
have-
there that conflicts with the law. Yep.
okay. Well, this is kind of the religious release time, but 8,500 food services talks about providing lunch for students participating.
I'm glad you said that.
And I actually don't know what we do now for the students that
So it
participate.
actually calls back to what we end up doing with the RTRI policy, because we have the option of allowing food service as part of the policy. But the way we wrote it, or the way that the what you have in front of you does not, it does not include that, because what it would do is force staff to pull lunches and do things like that. So
So we don't currently provide it.
right. So
Jennifer.
we need to talk
They-
about what we want.
The kids pack their lunch.
Correct.
Right.
Or
No
are
extra-
provided
correct.
it.
No extra lunch for our.
Correct.
Right.
That is
So
accurate.
what we need to do, I think, is align on the RTRI language and then align on that.
Because this policy, because it says adopt as marked, I think is saying that we do need to provide them lunch.
That's where Stephanie was saying, we need to align on, if we're aligned on how we have proposed RTRI, then we will
We'll
not
strike
provide
that.
it. We will
That-
strike that.
Yeah. The kind of the
okay.
background to that is Chef Sam reviewed that because it's, under his auspices, and then that was done separate from the RTRI
Right.
piece, and so that,
And there's a lot more to that than the RTI piece.
Right.
So,
Yes.
okay. Okay,
So just,
that was it on my questions until we get to the other.
just with that question, so I'm looking at this as an option for providing lunch, not that because you have a policy, you have to provide lunch. Is that how you're reading it, or is that how
which
it's
one are
explained
you on?
in the update?
I'm
The one
reading
that
it
Jennifer's
also that
referring
it's
to.
an option, but when their notes said accept policy as written, I guess my question was kind of, are we accepting that we have to provide
Gotcha.
lunch, or are we crossing that
I think
out?
that we are is safer for us to strike it
And just strike it.
because
Yeah.
it doesn't preclude us from doing that.
And actually, the way it is proposed right now, while it is drafted this way in the summary, if you look at 8,500, you'll note on the second page of the policy, the green is what is being proposed, but we haven't checked it.
Correct.
So we have not checked
That's
students
right.
who participate in
That's
release
right.
time
Okay.
courses in religious instruction. So we did not opt to include
check
it.
that
Yeah.
one.
Yes, so that's how I read it. That's what I wanted to clarify because
Yeah,
it does
okay.
say it's an end of option. So it's an option, it was not checked.
Checked.
Yeah,
And
correct.
so that's what I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify. Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. I was confused on that too.
I know, all the
because-
highlighting is
Yeah.
very, I mean, it just takes a while and then you get it and then we have months before we do it again.
Because there was one check on page 7 saying that if the student doesn't, if they have a negative balance, then they would not be permitted to purchase food. So I knew that didn't sound right, so.
Correct, correct.
It doesn't help that we have a Bible of policies.
Yes, no, it doesn't.
This was
No,
a
it doesn't.
lot.
Yes.
Along
This is
that
just a
same
portion.
lines too, I had a question on just the organization of the drug-free workplace. I didn't quite get why there were 1, 2, 3 different ones, what the differences were.
So that's how our policy is drafted. So there's a section that applies to certified, there's a section that applies to non-certified staff, and there's a section that applies
Oh,
to
okay.
our students. And that
Okay.
is just consistent with everything. So whether you're talking about anti-harassment or you're talking about a drug-free environment, each of those segments of our population are addressed in different places within the policy.
Thank you.
Of course.
We had the same question.
I just have
You're
I
good.
think 2 questions. One, so first for the first one, the bylaw, the 131.1 for technical corrections. It says renumbering subsections, sections, chapters, and titles. So we talked during our last policy update that some policy needed to be renumbered. We didn't have that number. It seemed odd. And so is this something, Dr. Bowers, that you would then look at to handle the renumbering according to this policy?
Correct.
Okay.
We would not have to come together as a policy committee.
Okay, that's helpful.
It is very helpful.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was one question about that. So I just wanted to clarify. Throughout, as I was reading this, throughout these policies, and again, this is just a fraction of all of our policies. So I just have a general question about, in our policy, it says parent a lot. And is parent defined in our policies as parent, guardian, custodial, so that we can continue to say parent, but it includes everyone? Or do we need to change parent? Or is it not matter that much?
I think it matters.
Yeah.
And I thought that was one of the changes that Neola was making in connection with like making things gender neutral. But I think that's something that the policy committee can take away and come back at our next report and provide an update on that.
Okay, I can look through, there are a couple, and I can always send that to one of you.
Yeah, just send it to both of us, that's
okay.
great.
So I think if once we adopt 131.1, if we as a board create a definition or whatever, if we agree on a standard definition, then any language that needs to be standardized in the policies can be done outside of, like, can be done, Dr. Bowers can do, I think.
Correct. Through the technical corrections.
Okay.
Turn your mic on.
Sorry, Kelly, there is a parent definition in board policy. So the natural adoptive or surrogate parents or the party designated by the courts as the legal guardian or custodian of a student.
Okay. Good. Thank you for finding that.
Thank you. So I will stop looking at that. And I was just getting to the point where I said, okay, maybe, you know how it's the district, and then you just continue to use that terminology.
Yeah, I do, though, think at some point it's worth looking at the policies for consistency.
Yes.
Because I don't like having both.
I understand that.
Right?
So district is a perfect, because in some of these it says district, some it says school district. And so it's just nitpicky, but yeah. I think just cleaning it up would be nice.
Oh.
Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
So how are we doing this? Are we?
I think we should start at the beginning of the table.
Well, I was going to say, what we typically do is just ask if we don't have to go through every single one of them. What we typically do is ask if there are any questions or concerns, assuming that everyone has taken the time to do the first reading. And that's why I made the corrections on the status recommendation. And then Jennifer, you had a couple that had stood out. I assume we all want to talk about 5223, release time for religious instruction. And so it probably would be a great time for everyone to do what Jennifer did, which is there anything other than 5223 that anyone has comments on or questions? Go for it, Callie.
Because since we're not going through them, I just wanted to ask a quick question about 5350. So it's the student health, well-being, and suicide that we're tabling. And I was just curious as to the reason for tabling.
We wanted additional input from the district personnel.
Perfect.
Yep.
If someone else wants to go, I know I have a second question, but I can't remember I know what policy it is, but I don't remember what the question is about. The policy, so I need to look at my notes. So if someone else has a different question, you can ask that, and I'll come back.
Yeah, I've got some. I'm just trying to find them. Oh, here's one. Okay. 5751. Give everybody time to get there. So this is talking about parental status of students. And there is a paragraph in here talking about lactating students. So we made the addition, which I think is good, that the location that the student would be expressing breast milk would be, would have an electrical outlet. I think that's good. But I also think, and I was looking at some policies and other workplaces and other, situations where there's access to a refrigerator.
Ooh, I like that.
So I thought
Yeah.
that was important to add.
Yep.
We also don't say anything in here. It says that, it's shielded from view, not accessible, which all of that is important. But it doesn't say anything about being quiet and clean. And I don't know, how, not to complicate things too much, but when you're trying to do that, quiet is kind of important. And clean is definitely important too. So those were my thoughts on that one.
No, great suggestions. I'm comfortable with adding that language. I would hope that all of our facilities are clean, but it doesn't hurt to state.
Well, and it says in here, no bathroom, so that's good.
That is very good,
Right.
yes.
So I think it's a good policy, and the refrigerator, and then using the word somewhere, I don't, that's your all's job is, but clean and quiet, somewhere in there would be nice, I think.
Okay, thank you.
And what else? I had a question on, 7440.01, video surveillance and electronic monitoring. Where is it? And so this, forgive me if I'm getting lost in the X's and the greens and the.
You're okay.
So if I start talking about something that's not even being proposed as part of it, I'm just confused and ignore me.
What page are you on?
So I'm on page 2 of 4.
Okay.
And there is an X in the second paragraph, the first full paragraph on that page. And it says security staff and administrators are authorized to carry and use portable video cameras when responding to incidents. And I just wondered, do we need to elaborate any there? Do we need any explanation, any definition for what an incident is? I don't know the answer, I'm just throwing it out there.
Sure. That is that's not a change. That's how our current policy reads.
Oh, okay.
And I wouldn't be inclined not to unless we have been advised that by our administrators that additional clarification is needed, and if that's ever been challenged or people have been confused about it or anything along those lines. That's just my first reaction. Stephanie was over there shaking her head, so I'm gonna.
The reason I agree, I agree. I think that there are a lot of definitions around like what can be recorded, which I think would be the concern around defining incidents, like not recording something that we shouldn't. And I think looking through this, I think that was fairly well defined, and then what we can and can't release. So I'm fairly comfortable with it. I am comfortable with it. Fairly is not.
Okay. And then just one more question on that one, sorry. At the very, very end, and again, maybe this is not even supposed to be, but it says that the superintendent shall conduct a review, but it doesn't have a check. Like if that's supposed to be annually, quarterly, monthly.
Oh.
Are we supposed to insert the interval there? Do you see it on page 4 of 4?
Yeah.
Yep.
So. And I don't have a strong opinion on what that
The
should be.
very last one.
Still on the same policy, 7440.01, but it just doesn't have an X
Dr. Bowers, when you think about, because this is part of the current policy, when you think about whether it's you personally or those that you put in charge of this aspect of or have responsibility over this aspect of our policy, what do you feel like is a reasonable interval for that section?
I think it's annual.
Okay.
I do.
Thanks for catching that.
I do, for what it's worth, I do think there's a bracket in front of that.
Oh, you're right. We haven't checked it. Yeah, we don't have.
So we don't have it.
It's not in our current policy.
Yeah, so let's not.
The last paragraph in our current policy starts with the video surveillance.
Perfect. That's why we didn't check it. Thank you. That's when there's multiple brackets, how it can be confusing.
Yes.
Whether it's a bracket or a parentheses. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have another one. Good. Sorry, I don't mean to dominate this at all, so.
No, this is why we go through these together.
So policy 8452, automated external defibrillators. This is on page 1. This is part of the new text, third paragraph, the first big paragraph at the very bottom. It's talking about that the training will be incorporated into a larger training, blah, 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 that's required upon initial employment and every 5 years thereafter. So my question is, I know that the training I've had in the past for AED and CPR and everything, it's every 2 years for, renewing that certification. So I don't know, maybe this is a whole different, but it said somewhere it had to be with like the national, where is it? Here it is, the American Heart Association or the American Red Cross. So I know mine's through the Red Cross and it was 2 years. So I guess my question is 5 years enough?
I think this is from the House Bill 47.
Correct.
Just that's what was mandated.
That was just the language in there, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Nothing precludes us from doing it more.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Dr. Bowers just side-eyed.
Good thing is AEDs are easy, which people don't understand.
They talk to you.
They talk
to you.
through it. Yes.
Yeah, but when you're in that moment and it's, it's.
Absolutely.
Your brain just stops working sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is about the cell phone policy. Maybe we want to wait on that one, or do we want to get into that one? I think I have a couple others that are kind of smaller.
We can.
So the cell phone policy is 5136.
Yep.
And it's titled Personal Communication Devices. The entirety of the policy is related to students, though. It doesn't concern teachers. It doesn't mention staff. Do we need to have something in the title of the policy that it's a student personal communications devices?
I think we can verify this, but where it is located,
it's in like the
it's in the student section.
Yeah, it is.
I can verify.
It is.
That. Okay.
5,000 is student.
Yep.
Okay.
And then 3,000 is professional staff, 4,000 is classified staff.
Okay, all right, so then no, we do not. One thing, I think it might be a typo maybe, or maybe I was just getting tired because I underlined it. So it's on page 3.
Of which one?
It's the same policy, sorry. That's a cell phone. It's page 3, it's all the way at the bottom, the last paragraph, and it's talking about possession of a PCD by a student during school hours and during school-related events and functions may be forfeited by any student who fails to abide by the terms of this policy. Is the student who's caught with the infraction also forfeiting willingly, or am I just really overthinking the sentence? So possession of a PCD by a student may be forfeited by any student. Isn't someone forcing the forfeiture?
Yeah, we might be able to tweak that a little bit, may result in the forfeit.
Something.
Something that's like basically not,
Because the way it reads
Yeah.
now, it makes me think that like another student over here could just come along and forfeit the student's phone that was in possession when they shouldn't have been. But again, maybe that's just me.
we can look at that and see if there's a better way to reword it.
Okay.
Since we're on cell phones real fast. On that first page where it talks about grades 9 through 12 may not use cell phones in classrooms. Do we need to say cell phones in classrooms during class instruction? I only say that because like, what if a student is in a classroom that's not being utilized? I mean, does that mean classrooms are off limits completely? Or
I know how
is it during instruction time during, and I guess I don't necessarily even want to say just instruction time. It's not when the teacher stops instructing, then, like if there's 5 minutes left in the class. But just to limit it to classrooms, I don't know if that's too limited.
Kelly, where is that, just so that I can actually read it? No, you're
So
totally
it's on the
fine.
first page.
First page in blue?
In blue, grades 9 through 12 may not use cell phones in classrooms.
And the reason I think we were intentional about that is because we are giving them the right to use it in hallways. We're giving them the right to use it in lunch, in the lunchroom.
Before and after school.
Before and after school.
Is there a time when a student is in a classroom during a non-instructional time that they
No,
would be
like
able to?
during, academic assist, that includes, like, you're not allowed to use them during academic assist. That's the way it's currently applied. So
Right,
in a
that part I know.
non-instructional time.
I'm saying if like there's two students having a meeting after school or during school, or is this just during school? Maybe it just says during school. If there's a meeting during a lunchtime and they're utilizing a classroom, that's just why I'm asking. Do you know what I mean?
So
Like,
I think under the way you're saying it, technically, your concern would be valid. Everything will be in how it's enforced.
Okay.
Right? And
Got it.
so, I think intent matters. The intent here would be during a teaching period in a classroom, our students can't have their cell phones.
Okay.
But you are correct. Like a technical interpretation, there could be a time where kids are in a classroom for another purpose. But I don't believe we would enforce that from or preclude something from an enforcement standpoint.
That was all.
I had kind of thought of that one too. I'm glad you mentioned that, Kelly, because what we're trying to do here with the blue text is mirror our current policy, right? We were trying to just sort of codify that. So I know that currently at the end of class, some of the teachers, it's very much like a case-by-case basis. The students are, at least in the high school classrooms, are taking them out and using their cell phones at the end of class time if the teacher allows it. So I don't know if we want to put some language in there that gives the teacher any discretion at all. I'm not advocating for or against, but I think to your point, it is happening now. So if we're trying to mirror what's happening, then I don't know.
There is go ahead, Dr. Bowers. I would say there is language that says or otherwise specified by the principal.
I would be against discretion.
Okay.
Knowing that teachers are still going to take discretion.
Okay. You'd be against codifying discretion.
Well, yeah, I mean, so previously, before we put these practices in place, our stance was cell phones are up to the discretion of the teacher. And our teachers really said, we need something consistent. So I do think we have to provide something consistent.
Okay.
Now, knowing that there will be some level of inconsistency, but I think we want to say this is consistent. Because really, that's what our teachers asked for.
It's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's helpful too, because I know that I'm the one that brought it up, but students also ask for consistency. So we probably should be consistent in that way. I was just wondering if we could add something to it, but we'll just leave it so that it's not more confusing and doesn't appear as for discretion.
Oh, 7540.04. Staff technology, acceptable use, and safety policy. So my thoughts are on the AI section. So it's begins on page 3, extends into page 4. My first thought is, and I love that we have AI, and I love that we're trying to do this. You know, this is just, it is an ever-moving target. So I'm sure that things that we're putting in here today are going to be obsolete and just need to be updated here in a month or a year. But I love that we're trying, because it is important and it's not going away. So my first thought on here, the paragraph where it's ensuring the integrity of the educational process and promoting fair and equal opportunity for all students with the use of artificial intelligence tools. And it does a great job, I think, sort of outlining, you know, why we believe that these tools are important, and students are encouraged to develop their own knowledge and skills and understanding. The one thing, and again, maybe I was tired at this point and missed it, so please tell me if it's in here. Do we talk about safety at all? Do we talk about the students having, you know, some type of training or something on, I know they're doing real-time training, right, as things are put in front of them, but just understanding that when they put something in ChatGPT, it lives forever, you know? They shouldn't be putting in like personal information. They shouldn't be putting in anything that somebody, that they, you know, it's not just an anonymous website that can't be pulled from other people. So I guess there are privacy concerns here, and I don't see that reflected in the policy. And again, maybe I'm missing it.
The way I look at this, you're not missing it here.
Okay.
The way I look at it is, I think it's twofold. So we have other policies around data privacy and security. So that's one piece of this. And then the other piece of like the safety and learning and that kind of stuff, I don't see as a board policy versus that's more of a, I think more of a curriculum piece. And Angie and her team have a whole strategy around how we educate teachers and then how we educate students and how we roll AI out. I'm comfortable with that, but I mean, I think it's a good discussion to have.
Yeah, I guess I'm not, you know, advocating that we kind of go into the detail of what that safety looks like, but just since we're having that kind of like, you know, high, like, vision, like, and articulating sort of the values of AI, and maybe if there could be some type of like, just, you know, insistence on safety being utilized in the classroom, and I don't know.
Or do we
where
want
it's
to
worded
call
or
back
how
to the
it's worded.
policy for data security and stuff like that? Or like, we could
Maybe,
write
yeah,
that
maybe
in, like
that's a way.
in accordance to board
Yes.
policy, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, just somehow, somewhere in here that just, you know, because I think we do a really good job of like articulating, you know, why we should use it, but I just feel like that's the only lacking. That would be my thought. I don't know how to word it. I don't know where to put it in there, but.
The first full paragraph after the subset A through E, where it talks about the different kinds of assistance, research, data, analysis, whatnot, it starts out by saying when AI tools are used responsibly and effectively, we could include the word safely, and possibly add an additional sentence to that paragraph that refers back to where we talk about that particular area of safety more extensively within the policy.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Okay.
It does list, I mean, on page 3, in that green and blue paragraph, it talks about the use of AI tools responsibly balances the benefits with the need for academic integrity, skill development, and protection
Oh, it
of
does say
staff and
protection of
student data.
Yeah.
So is that what you're looking like? Or do you want it
I think that's good. I just like the word safety.
Okay.
But I think that part is good. I might have glazed over that
No, it's okay. It's a lot.
because I didn't have it circled. So, but yeah, that's essentially what I think, we can say in there
Okay.
that we want our students to use this. We want our students to be empowered by it, but we also want them to do it in a mindful and safe way.
So we'll add, so with that call out above, we'll add the term safely to that when AI tools are used sentence, and that covers us then? Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just add, not for policy, but we have developed administrative guidelines around AI. And so that a lot of the instructions to staff members would come through those administrative guidelines.
Yeah, I know it's being done. I'm not doubting that in any way, that, we're doing a good job of keeping our students safe. I just thought maybe the policy should reflect that too.
Well, currently, many of the AI tools, while students will be permitted to use them, they won't actually be open at school because of student data privacy. But that does require a lot of education, because it doesn't mean they won't be able to create their own accounts on personal devices or at home, or, So while while the Senate Bill 29 data privacy piece will be covered, educating students on, hey, when you use this tool, is super critical.
I do want to say too, while we're on this policy, I really like that we are going the direction of embracing AI. I think it's so important, and I'm really happy with everything that we're doing here.
Yeah, because Neola gave us the option, right? Like that was the other one.
Yeah, that's all.
I'll have it.
Yes.
And I don't think that's the right choice either.
Yeah.
No.
It's scary, and it's
all things
kind of overwhelming, right? But it's not going away. My other thought on this policy was it's the continuation of that green and blue paragraph that we've added. It's page 4 now. And so it's talking about teachers have the discretion to authorize students to use AI tools for the following uses. And then we list these out: research, data, language translation. So the one that I'm kind of getting hung up on, and I will just throw this out here for maybe I'm just overthinking this too, is the writing assistance. And I worry, because if you read through this, it's talking about AI tools can provide feedback on students' writing, including grammar and spelling corrections. Fine with that. That already exists in Microsoft Word, right? As well as suggest alternative word choices, sentence structure. Fine. Already there in Word. To help students improve their writing skills. Similarly, AI tools can offer suggestions to modify tone and voice. This is where I start getting nervous. Organize a student's thinking, identify bias, suggest additional topics, and ask questions to expand the student's thinking on a topic. So I just worry that this is going to
Some of that I view as and I'll look at my friend who's a teacher in the audience.
I'm not the
who's
expert
talked
here,
about
but I do write.
using it for brainstorming.
Yes,
It's
and
so
it's great for that.
Yes.
It is.
And then I have other friends actually who use it for exactly what you're talking about as far as sentence structure. Like, what is a better way? Like when you were talking about that one sentence that didn't make sense, I was like, some people use AI specifically for that. Like, what's another way to say this? And it's remarkable what it comes up with. So
we had also AAPL, our last session was all on AI, and Angie did an amazing presentation. And we touched specifically on writing. Would you talk a little bit about your thought process there?
Yeah, I just think, for example, we had Magic School in today. That's been a board-approved AI platform for teacher use and student use. What you get out of AI really depends on the level of prompt that you enter into it. So I believe we need to do due diligence with our students and help them in how to write a prompt, because the more intricate the prompt is, the better results we get. And so remember, we are asking our teachers to give, the students have permission, but in cases where they don't want them to use it, they have that right to do that. And so I think there'll be times where our teachers will say, today's not a day to use AI. I want to see, what you're able to do without the use of AI. But today, during our Magic School training, we learned how to use those prompts as thought partners for our students, and how a student might enter their writing into the prompt and gain feedback. One of the things I'm really looking for is, whatever it is that the teacher is looking for in their rubric, help me with that. Where have I done well with this? Where might I add some to increase, my grade on my rubric or what the teacher's looking for. So that way of using it as a thought partner really helped us see that if the teacher isn't sitting beside me, I have the opportunity to gain some feedback through AI.
And I think it's great at, brainstorming. Like when you have writer's block and you just,
Correct.
Help me start a paper on blah. I guess I'm worried with allowing it that broadly to be used. And there is a provision later where it talks about, you have to like have a works cited page where you,
Correct. Yeah.
acknowledge that you've used AI. I guess I'm just worried that I want our students to be good writers.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
I know
I don't
that
think there's any
everyone here-
argument
right,
there.
Everyone
Absolutely.
here wants that. So I just worry that if we allow them to use it too much, they're going to use it, I guess, regardless of whether we have a policy about it or not. I guess putting it in writing though and giving them free license is different than them using it on their own. So
But
that's
it's not
my
free
only thought
license.
with
Yeah.
that. Again, I'm not pretending to be the expert on this at all. I just, that was just something that I thought, that went a little
Your concern
further,
that's fair. Your concern is real.
But
I will add that, the writing assistance, it does highlight the student's thinking. It says that a couple of times. And I do think that emphasizes, like what Angie is saying, is the student is putting their thinking, their thought into the prompt to get feedback.
no, that's true.
So maybe that is helpful to that. This doesn't mean just free reign and like you're just like type of paper for me.
Yeah.
You're actually, this is outlining the student's thinking. I definitely understand your pause. I don't mean to say it like that.
And with a teacher's discretion. So,
yeah.
I guess if you abuse it, it could just get taken away entirely.
Yeah, we have something in here about there needs to be a works cited. Do we have something that, there's plagiarism, I feel like mentioned, here it is. What's that say? Unauthorized use of AI tools. So I guess that was one of the things I thought too. So it's good, we're telling the students when they can use it and when they can't. And if they have been told they can't and they use it anyways, that's plagiarism. But what if they use it so extensively and it's written, am I getting in the weeds here? I'm sorry.
Yep, I do. So I think, like philosophically, by the board passing this policy, we're saying kids can utilize AI, but teachers have discretion on when they tell them they can't. So we have an open policy, but we're giving teachers discretion. I think really from a board standpoint, that's what we're putting out. Hey, this is something we need to embrace. And we believe it should be open, not closed, but we want to always make sure our teachers have discretion.
So
Everything else after that, I think, really becomes teacher in the classroom, working with kids and going day by day to say, here's what the assignment is, here's the expectations, and that's going to be different, I think, at all teachers. And, what you're kind of, I think, struggling with is what all of our English teachers are struggling with right now is, oh my gosh, the whole world changed in the last 12 months. And what kids are going to have to do has totally shifted. And how do we adapt and evolve? Angie's been working with that team specifically, and we'll come to that. But I don't think you're ever going to get there in policy. So.
And I guess maybe why I feel like I agree, I am getting in the weeds here, but does this get into the weeds too much? Are we going into too much detail? And I don't know the answer. I'm just
that was all kind of
throwing it out,
standard
you know?
from Neola.
From Neola,
if
right,
the board
I know,
wanted to
but-
strike all of that, that'd be fine. What
Yeah.
we really want, I think, from a school district or from an administrative standpoint, is to say, or what we'd like the board to support, which I believe you're in alignment on, which is we are embracing AI. We want it to be open for students, but we want to give teachers discretion on when to tell them, hey, this is not the time to use it.
Yeah.
So I think you bring up a good point, Amber. Like, because my thought when we started looking at this, I'm like, well, this is all going to change in 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Like, do we want?
So do we just say teachers have the discretion to authorize students to use AI tools?
Period.
Period.
Yes.
And then strike everything.
I mean,
I don't have a problem with that. It's a lot of detail.
You don't prefer to have?
No, it's fine.
No.
Actually, we're always going to default. Like, we look at policy, but we're really, in the classroom, it's going to be a default to what were the teacher's instructions? And we're
Yeah.
always going to support the teacher in the classroom and the instructions that they provided to students.
Then I think our policy should just reflect that.
I'm very comfortable with that, in large part also because you guys are actively working to provide those guidelines, recommendations, as to help our teachers, in turn, help our students to understand how best to use this tool, because the tool is not going away. And it is something they need to know how to safely and responsibly use. And it is beneficial. So I'm very comfortable with modifying that to after tool period, and then get rid of all of the subsets.
Yeah, and we could, I just added, we might want to add, and we can talk about this, to use AI tools as appropriate or something like that, but.
You might want to say district-approved AI tools.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
Maybe, just a suggestion.
I like that.
That's not a maybe, that's a great suggestion, thank you.
Okay, and then strike the details.
Okay.
And then we would pick up again when AI tools are used responsibly.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And then add something about safety maybe, or
Less is
safety
more.
or something.
Yep,
in that sentence.
safely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's a good policy, I think. It's a good starting point for a policy. We'll probably have that one every few months. Policy 513601. And this is just, I think, possibly maybe an oversight, a typo, I don't know. It's a Neola edit. But second paragraph, it defines students. Or it defines student, and it just feels like a weird place to have a definition of student in the middle of the policy. I mean, I'm sure that's defined way before this, right?
Yeah, we can verify
I
that.
think that's because some of this language come from, no, never mind.
And this was
There was a Senate bill, I mean, this is Senate Bill 29 change, yeah.
Yeah. But we don't need to define student, do we? When we're this
Likely
deep into the
not.
policy book.
Likely not, no.
And also, this is another one of those examples where I was saying sometimes it says school district, sometimes it says district, so.
We can look at that
Just
and just do
consistency stuff.
consistent,
You
yeah.
can just do a search and replace at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah.
And I think that's all I had except for RTRI.
Any other comments or questions regarding any of the other policies other than 5223 RTRI?
Just one.
Just one, Kelly?
Just
Okay.
one. Hold on, let me get to it. Let's play the Jeopardy music. Let's see here. Okay, so it is policy 5610.
Mm-hmm.
And on page 4, there's an X for number 4, imminent and severe endangerment of health and safety of students or employees. And on page 1, there's also an option for what seems like the same wording. It says the student's actions pose imminent and severe endangerment to the health and safety of other students or employees. But that option is not checked. And I was just curious as to why check one and not the other? Or does checking 4 cover the one on the first page?
Let me reread this again really quickly just to refresh my recollection.
I do know that we validated that the language in 4 comes from the bill, because I had a question about something else there.
Yeah, no, I actually think that that was perhaps just an oversight on our part as we were going through the policy and really got into the meat of it. And I agree with you. I would read it such that if we are adopting that second part, because then it goes, that second part where it goes into detail regarding posing imminent or severe endangerment, it actually does give the right for the suspension, the expellment, and so it makes sense to include that and the check in the first part as well.
Okay.
Thank you for catching that.
Then on page 3, in the green section there's also an option there. And it says this option may be selected if the board adopts section C4, which is what you checked.
Which we did. So it
So should
probably
that
should
be
have been
checked
checked
as well,
too.
or no?
Well, let's look
Okay.
at it though, because it
Yeah.
may be selected. But I guess, yeah, we want it to be in line with that, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Because C4 outlines a reinstatement process, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That was all I had. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for all of your work. I know that that's a lot, and I appreciate Tracy putting it together, Dr. Bowers and all the administration for giving feedback to us as the people who are in the buildings and know how this is going to land. So I appreciate that time before we dive into 5223.
Excellent. So I started by just saying that I had listened to at least one other school district discuss this policy, and just had a few more comments that I wanted to share as a result of that. But I don't need to start there. I mean, we can start with anything. Are there
What's the
particular-
number? I don't.
It's okay, 5223? You don't have it memorized?
No.
Come on.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful to share with the three of you our thought behind the changes that we made?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. So the changes that we made were several, and this is just for discussion, certainly. So obviously we need to have the policy. It was our intention to mirror our original language around not pulling kids out of core curriculum time. So that's one of the changes that was inserted. We made reference earlier to the lunch piece where we felt that if we asked our staff to pull lunches, that would be an undue burden that we should not ask them to do. So that was a piece that we, I think, struck. The question has come up around who is responsible for background checks and who monitors the background checks. So one of the pieces that we kind of rewrote and our way to solve for the background check piece, we don't want to be responsible for doing those background checks as a district. But what we are proposing is that we ask any organization that is utilizing our TRI time to mirror or do what we do in our policy. So we refer to our policy for background checks, to conduct their background checks in that manner, and then have somebody within the organization, and we gave language to who that person should be, certify that that has been done and submit that certification so that we have that, but we're not performing background checks, keeping track of background checks, doing any of that.
Paying for background checks.
Correct.
Yep.
So that was a big piece there. We went back to no more than one time per week. I know Nikki wants to discuss that, so that's something that we should discuss at the table. But regardless of that time frame, I feel pretty strongly that we include language around no state or district testing days. So we added that in there. I think those were the big ones. Did I miss anything?
No, you didn't miss anything. Yep.
This is a new policy technically, right? Because we rescinded the old.
Correct.
So really, should this entire thing be green? Just.
No, it was, we thought it was helpful to see like what we
What we
had
had
before.
Okay. So the first sentence then was part of our previous, because I struggle to make sense of it.
No, that was not part of our previous.
That came from Neil, I think.
Yeah.
Because I just don't know that, because you're saying we desire to cooperate, but also enforce attendance requirements. And I don't know that that's the juxtaposition here. So I would suggest just striking that language and starting with students shall, blah, 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 but that's just a thought.
There's nothing there that's required by the
Yeah,
state, so I don't think there's an issue with that.
And then the proof of liability insurance. So we say in C on page 1, sponsoring entity will provide and assume liability for the student, which I think is absolutely important. But I also think that we should ask for proof of liability insurance to the district on an annual basis. My concern here is if the sponsoring agency simply says, sure, we have liability insurance, and then something happens, it opens up the school district for potential litigation because we don't have any proof that they.
I would suggest that we add that to the certification piece.
Yeah, so
I
what
don't
we're
wanna-
requiring is that it is
I don't
in
wanna hold that.
writing, that it's notarized, and that it's executed by a principal, so basically of the entity, so someone who has the authority to do it.
Yes.
So it's not as just an assistant is signing something, it has to meet those qualifications.
Yeah, but I think that should also be a record we have in our possession. I appreciate the B where it's talking about that the sponsoring entity will maintain attendance records and make them available to the district. I feel like that that language needs to be stronger. I think because, and I use, for example, my middle daughter's in ski club. I forgot to let the ski club organizer know the other night that she was not going on the bus. They called me before they pulled out. They called me from the bus to let me know she wasn't on the bus because they were worried about her not being on the bus. And so my concern here is if they're taking attendance records and not immediately notifying the school before they pull away that they don't have Billy or whoever, then we've got a problem. The parents have a problem. Everybody's got a problem that maybe we have a missing kid on our hands.
Yeah, and so that was one of the things that another school district in the area discussed like, in order to make that effective, what is the time period under which we would need to ask for it? And it varies depending upon when release time for religious instruction is being provided. Like you could imagine if it's being provided at the end of school and the kids are going off somewhere after that, like you definitely need it immediately as well. We would arguably know, but it would be an hour or 45 minutes later that we wouldn't know if they didn't get on the bus, right?
But what happens, okay, so a kid doesn't get on a bus and they don't make that, I'm thinking about it from the district side. The kid doesn't get on a bus and they make that call, then we're asking district resources, school resources to track that kid down.
We could require that it is provided upon arrival at their facility. And we would want to know if everyone that we thought was leaving for our TRI is not arriving at the destination.
And I think if the student wasn't, I understand what you're saying. I think though that if the student wasn't on the bus, then it would be our purview to be involved in that situation.
It
because
would
then
be,
there
I'm
would
just
still
thinking about
be-
contracts, right? Like what we're asking people to do, what we can and can't ask, what burden they have to carry.
Well, that goes to another point that was brought up, which is that if they don't comply, and I think this is something actually we may need to take back to our attorney, at what point is something that can be cured versus something that says you haven't complied, whether you've done it like a number of times or one time, or when does it take away their ability to participate, the organization's ability to participate in release time for religious instruction? So they have these statutory requirements. If they don't meet those, what is their cure period, and when can we say then if you haven't met them, it's an endangerment to our children and our students, and therefore you can't participate. That's something.
It was in here. Is that not in here somewhere? Where if there's a violation of this
There's
policy?
there's just one point where that says that.
Oh.
I do think it should be highlighted in different sections at each requirement.
Yeah.
But I do have a question as we're on this attendance piece. When individuals come in from an organization, they have to sign out each individual student, correct?
Yeah.
So there's a list there. And can't they, at that time, there's a list, check, 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 don't have Billy before getting on the bus? These are the we know these are the students.
When they sign them out, they'll know if they're present in school, so you have that check.
Right.
And then if they're signing them out, if they're signing them out there, that should.
I guess the question is, does the entity that we've used in the past, I guess, because that's what we're basing this on, right? How it's been used historically. Are they in the office when the kids are going through because it was explained to me that that's the office staff that historically has done that. And then they are dismissed to the entity that then takes attendance. But maybe I misunderstood that there's like a separation a little bit there.
Yeah, Rob.
Because I think
We're
if it
looking at
happened
you.
like you all are saying,
Yeah.
if that person was in the office, then
Then it's fine.
that would be an
Yeah.
attendance check. I
Yeah,
guess
so-
in my head, they're two separate times.
I can speak to that. So the way that checkout works is we're provided by the entity a list of approved volunteers on their end. So we verify that whoever comes into the office is on that list that has had background checks. Then we do ask that each student is checked out of our Safe School ID system. So each office staff has a list of what students in each grade level have signed up to participate in the programming, and then students are signed out that way. So we would have knowledge of what students are registered to participate as they leave the building.
Okay.
I think that covers it.
Solves that then. So maybe then, I don't know, do we need to reword that at all? Maintains attendance records and makes them available to the district? Because
I think we can leave that. We obviously, based on our system, will have those records of who was signed out, but we can strike it or leave it. I don't know that.
I had
Feel
reports.
strongly either way.
Yeah, I said reports absences to the district immediately upon detection. I guess detection could happen in the office. But I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't be a thing.
I think attendance records, probably that piece was in there if you, not everybody maintains them the same way, but that aside, I think, we are not exercising the option for the credits, and so I think that probably comes into play with that piece. So we may be able to just strike the attendance records if we don't feel like we need them to maintain those.
I guess I would
You
I would
have it.
rather them
Okay.
have
So
them,
then let's just
absolutely,
leave
so
it.
that we know, yes, on their end, who's arriving and, and I guess just the question is.
Do we add a time frame? Because there's no time frame, right? It just says makes them available to the district. That could mean 10 years from now. That could mean, so I don't know.
Yeah, do we want to say as soon as requested?
Or upon request.
Upon request?
Yeah, upon request is fine. I think, again, I think Stephanie's right. I think this is intended for if you were to provide credit for something. I do like the idea of keeping something with attendance in there, just because it codifies the idea that we have these attendance procedures, attendance is important to us. But because of the way that we're utilizing the program currently, we are going to know whether a student left or didn't leave.
And comes back.
Correct.
But you did, and as we were discussing that, you hit upon another part that I would want to come back in our second reading with any recommendations, if there are any, that it only speaks to the policy as drafted only talks about prohibiting participation of a private provider if they fail to adhere to the fact that students can't bring back any material, snacks, clothing, candies, trinkets, or other items when they return to school. I have a bigger question from a legality standpoint of if you've got a provider that hasn't adhered to other statutory requirements, is there a cure period? Are they not able to participate immediately? Like, it's just not clear as has been recommended, as the statute has been drafted. So I think that it would be helpful to understand how recommendations from our council and how other districts are addressing that.
Yeah, and I agree that having the district not release students based on that one thing is a little wonky. I almost think it gets pulled out as its own piece, and then we get council's recommendation for what that looks like. Yeah,
holistically.
That was my note, is that it was just there
versus
if they adhere to this prohibition, and then I'm thinking that it should also be if you don't adhere to these requirements. I mean, it says the
What if you don't have insurance, right?
requirements.
I mean, like, I guess that's a given, but at the same time, like, let's say they drop it and then they get it back, like, just some guidance in that space would be really helpful.
and it's going to be hard to account for every eventuality, but I
Of
do
course.
agree that just going to legal
Okay.
is
And
the way to go.
accounting is just something I can't wrap my head around either, because we talked so often, or so much when we were in this conversation before, about the scalability of this. Right, we're drafting a policy that could be for 50 different groups.
So that's one of the
Who's
things I wanted.
tracking this?
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about with regards to frequency. So I understand that we historically allowed once a week. I also don't think that when actually, the way we've articulated it is no more than 1 day per week. And maybe that no more than gets us where we need to be, because if you're talking about multiple private organizations that are doing this, it may not be feasible to schedule each of them to release students 1 day a week. It may be one day a month if you're talking about 4 different organizations and they're each taking different weeks during the month. So I thought I was going to come in advocating for different language, but I think that no more than is really important, because we don't know what the impact of this is going to be and how it could change over time.
And I think we have the option, we discussed this when it was just the policy meeting. We have the option of revisiting this policy. Should an issue arise, right? Or should this become a bigger thing? So that's always on the table as well.
Yeah, because if we had, if we just have one organization, once a week seems fine, right?
Yeah.
But if we have multiple ones all trying to utilize that once a week policy, we're not even having school anymore. We're just, the kids are just going all over the county. So yeah, I think it'll just have to be something we monitor.
That's true. Oh, sorry, go.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Okay, the only other thing that I heard mentioned that I wanted by another district that I wanted to just state here is that they talked about putting in writing the fact that we do not vet these third parties. And so we might want to, I don't know exactly where we would put that. A student's parents or guardian consents in writing and acknowledges that we don't vet these third parties. I don't know.
I'm
not saying it's a necessity, so if you feel like it's covered elsewhere, please point
the
it out.
sponsoring entity presumes liability or assumes liability. It's late. I think, and the fact that they are certifying that they have liability insurance, that they're signing the piece that says they're assuming liability. I don't know that there's any loophole there, really.
Would it address your concerns if we were the ones who drafted the parent or guardian consent form. And then
I mean, we did talk about that when we were looking at this the first time. Okay,
do.
so
then maybe
then
we
we
put
should just
something
say,
like that,
we
yeah.
should say parent or guardian gives, well, and this goes back to we can just say parent, right? Because but anyway, consistency throughout our policies. Okay, so anyway, parent or guardian gives consent in writing in the form provided by the district or something along
Yes,
those
yes,
lines?
yep,
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my question is what consent form, who sees that?
Yep.
How do we know that it's the parent or guardian?
Yeah,
Just
that
to
was one of
confirm
the
as a
things that
district
came
that.
up,
Yeah, but it's the one that okay, great.
Yep, okay.
Those were all of the additional points that I wanted to raise.
Okay.
Do we put something in here about limiting, or is this even, consistent with state law now? Can we limit the organizations that do this, or we just have to just open it up to anybody and everybody, and there's no limitations allowed on this, is there? In terms of quantity,
So-
in terms of like.
I think no, not based on the way that the language that was written in the bill, no.
Yeah.
I think, like, if it becomes a challenge, right, we can go through our legal provider to see, right, if it's inhibiting our ability to educate kids. I think I don't want to get too restrictive on that along those lines, because from a legal or from a policy standpoint, we have to be legislating just based on the overall thing, right? And we can't look at individual organizations and shouldn't look at individual organizations. And so I don't know.
I guess I was thinking, because of the scalability concern, right?
Yeah.
Like, can we limit this policy to no more than 4 entities can do this?
I don't think
at a
we
time
can,
or
and
something?
that's why the no more than one per week is really important, because our ability to scale this is in question, right? I don't think that the statute allows us to limit the number of entities.
And I think that's where the lawmakers would come back and say that kind of weird, vague language in the bill that says we'll work with the sponsoring entity to ... right? That's where that comes in, because we are obligated to work with those entities by law. Now, what that work with is not defined, but whatever. Yeah, we're gonna get down a really slippery slope too, I think, if we, I don't know, because if we limit the number of people, then it becomes this first in sort of situation, and I don't know.
Stephanie and I struggled with a lot of these things during policy committee, and really where we landed was what she said earlier. We can go back to this. Let's see where things go. There are a lot of what ifs that I think have all thought about in this space, and are valid what ifs, and things that we'll have to see how they play out, and what's the best way to ensure that we support our staff, that we support our students, and that education remains our primary focus, and we minimize the distractions and
abide by the law.
And abide by the law. Yep.
Yeah, because so we can't limit the number of sponsoring entities. We can't limit the number of students who participate on a daily basis. Because I'm just thinking, what happens if our schools are this happens in the rural districts?
Yeah, where you've got all kids leaving at a particular time.
Right, and the schools are just empty. So that was one of the things that I was thinking through too here, just because, when we're thinking of working families and the needs that they truly have, and the lawmakers talk all the time about, how to make lives easier for working families, we need aftercare. Parents who have jobs that the school ends, and then there are these lost hours. Stephanie has little kids, you've had little kids. We know this, it's just hard when they get off the bus and they just have nowhere to go. So, if we could do something like this and make this an aftercare program, but then you have, so as I thought through that, that would mean core curriculum, right? Because then they would be dismissed early from a core curriculum class.
And other school districts thought about that as well, right? But that's exactly right. The pros and cons of them going off and coming back versus going off and then going. They were talking about it Gahanna was talking about it in the context of the bullying incidents, and that if you did it at the end of the school day and you allowed kids to go home, that there may be less of that because they're not coming directly back into the school environment. But that was not to them, and I agree, actually for us as well, it was not worth the taking of core curriculum time.
It also becomes an attendance challenge. Like I don't think I would be comfortable with the kids that we either have walk home or get on a bus, leave us, and then
Never
not
come
get
back to
checked
us.
back in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's where I guess the attendance immediately notification could maybe solve that. But yeah, we wouldn't know if they got home after the program was over. I don't know.
I mean, to Nikki and Stephanie's point about revisiting the policy if necessary, there is language in here. I mean, right now it's no more than 1 day a week per week, but quarter, semester, a year is in there. If it gets to be overwhelming and distracting and taking resources, which shouldn't happen, it is something that we can revisit.
But I would argue that it was. That's what we were hearing, at least from some of the community members, that it was when it was once a week causing disruption. It was causing, problems. I don't know. I'm 1 day a week is a lot. It's a lot of time to be out of our buildings and away from the classroom and away from recess and away from lunch and all the things.
Which is why it's drafted as no more than. I hear you.
I know, but it's still 1 day a week.
So when you're saying no more than 1 day per week, does that mean across the district? As in all 11 elementary schools, Wednesday is the day?
No.
Or each school is just 1 day at that school?
Well,
Just
as
clarify.
it's drafted, it's the student.
Yeah.
It's the entity, I should say, cannot pull a student out more than 1 day a week.
Okay.
Does each school have a different, or
Different
does
day.
the school pick the day? Or?
Well, I mean, each school is going to have to collaborate with the sponsoring entity to determine how their schedule is going to work. And I wouldn't want to hamstring the individual schools from
So the
making
school
those decisions.
principal and the entity choose what day is going to work best.
And I wasn't suggesting that. I was just asking for clarification.
No, it's a good question.
Amber, I don't agree with you. I will tell you, coming in, I was like, could we say 1 day a month? I've heard from others, and I've been cautioned that those who supported the bill have made it very clear that if districts get too restrictive, then they will get very prescriptive and come back and say it has to be at least this. I know that's a threat, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like we've given ourselves leeway with the language that we've used, and we have the ability to use it.
But you're a lawyer. If the law says that it's once a week, then our policy reflects it should be once a week. But the law doesn't say that.
Our
It
policy doesn't say that either.
I mean, Brenner said in committee that it could be 1 day a year.
I know,
If the
but then
He also said
exactly.
if districts push it, we will come back and force their hand, and we will re-legislate. And from
What does push it mean?
I guess from my perspective, like we have the ability to set this and see where it goes and redraft policy, change policy, whatever.
But we could say once a month. That's not once a year. That's not once a quarter or once a semester. It's once a month.
Candidly, that was what I shared when I walked in to this room today.
What does that get us? Like, and I'm just asking generally, what does that gain
I think
for us?
that because we tried previously when we had this policy, right? We had the once a week thing. We heard from many community members. We heard from teachers. We heard from a lot of people saying that it wasn't working. It was the reason we rescinded the policy, because we felt like we needed to hit a pause on everything. We were hearing so many concerns that were valid and about safety and all the things. And so if we've tried that and it didn't work, why would we go back to that with the hopes that it worked this time, and not, like, if we have the leeway to make it once a month, make it once a month.
I'm not opposed to it. Like, Stephanie knows that I walked in and I proposed that to her when I
I'm
arrived.
back to agreeing with what you said a few minutes ago, Nikki, just the whole intent of the law. I know they didn't say anything specific. I was shocked when I read the policy that they gave us those options, because in my mind, when kids go to religious instruction with their own family, it's a once a week kind of thing. I don't know. That's the way I grew up. That's the way my kids.
And it's also not during the school day.
I think a once a week on Sunday morning or Wednesday night or whenever, but I would think that the legislators' intention was once a week. I think a once a 9 weeks or once a semester I saw on another district. I'm like, oh boy, the legislature's gonna come back and get
I just think
more detailed on this.
The more we talk, I start getting, I just think legislative intent has to be codified. It's just philosophical if it's not. So, and Brenner, I think, is on the record as saying that school districts can do this. And you're right, maybe it's a trap. I don't know. But we're not doing that, which I think is the more drastic side of this.
That's just why I was thinking
right?
once a month as well.
Once a month seems reasonable to me. It seems like, it still also allows us to scale this. We can, if it does get bigger, and I understand we can revisit the policy, but once you open Pandora's box and everything's going a certain way, pulling it back is harder.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm going to interject here just to say, we've had the first read and we have the second read. And so we have time to think about language, think about options, and then when we come back for the second read, we have another discussion. I'm not saying, but I feel like we're repeating ourselves and maybe just need a pause. Just to think about language coming back.
Can I ask a procedural question?
For sure.
So when we do a first read, we recommend that we make changes, we get a second copy. And then I believe, not that we've done this in the past, but I believe I've seen meetings in the past where then we do a second read. And even at that second read, we can recommend certain language and still pass it at that, and pass it with the caveat of, if these changes are made, I am voting yes, right?
That is excellent.
And so I bring that up to say, the reason that we are reading we're doing all of this policy together, but this piece is the time-sensitive one. And so it has to be, because there is a directive that we have policy, and this has to be in policy by April 8th.
Correct.
So I'm being overly explanatory, sorry. So we're doing that, so this still gives us time, even if we come back with a second read and change it, to get it, because we only have one meeting in March, to get it into our policy and be compliant.
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm suggesting is just taking the information that everyone has shared today, including Amber's suggestions, and considering them before we come back for our second.
Yeah.
I don't find that continuing the conversation right now is going to be further productive, right? So, and in that time period, you could, just think about other options, or if you still feel strongly, or if you are like, maybe that does make sense. It makes sense to me that we rescinded a policy because during our 1 week time, it wasn't productive or it was overwhelming, right? That's the feedback that we got at the time. So I understand why Amber feels how she feels, right? Why she's, sharing that perspective, okay? And also, it's probably once a week, like maybe that was their intention, okay? So let's gather all that information. This is just my suggestion. I am one person. To think about that, process it, and then come back for the second reading
Can we ask our attorney, has she been involved in this? The things that are in blue that we added, has she gone over these to give her okay? And can we ask her what she thinks about the 1 week versus 1 month?
I like that suggestion. We're already asking her to talk about violations of the policy, so we absolutely can include. And the thing I like about that is you've got a good attorney, which we do have good attorneys. They're telling you what's a reasonable risk, right? They're not telling you like to go in the ultra conservative or the ultra lenient, like what's a reasonable space to land. And so having that advice of counsel, I think would be very helpful in this space.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Stephanie.
Is that the last piece that we have on policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Number 4 under information and proposals is the review of the special education resolution.
So I'll just speak to this. Obviously, you see the special education resolution in your agenda. We are required to pass a resolution now yearly and submit that resolution to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. This resolution simply says that we will follow the model policies that are put out by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce when it comes to special education. That is something that we have always done, but you will now see this resolution yearly come before the Board of Education because it's now a yearly requirement, and this is the first time that you see it.
Are there any questions about the resolution before we move on? We will see it again in Board of Business.
I do not have questions.
Okay, Superintendent's report, Dr. Bowers.
Awesome. So in Worthington Schools, we have 4 vision statements that help us accomplish our mission to empower a community of learners that will change the world. Our first vision statements, we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. Tonight, we introduced the responsible staffing plan. And just as a reminder, the goals of the staffing plan were to maintain enhanced support, limit future staffing growth to enrollment increases, and to do both of those to help us align spending with historical tax support and stretch our levy dollars. So we believe that will help us continue to consistently engage our students over the long term. Our second vision statements, we will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. Something that I hope that all residents know that Worthington Schools has partnered with Prevent Blindness Ohio to assist our families in finding vision care for our uninsured or underinsured students. So if teachers or principals or community members have a concern about a student needing glasses or vision care, they simply need to reach out to their school nurse or health office assistant in their building. The nurse team can submit a referral for that student to be seen for a free exam and glasses prescription if needed. So that's pretty cool. Our third vision statements, we will provide a consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. As mentioned as part of the responsible staffing plan in January of this year, we received an updated enrollment projection from the planning company Wolpert. This report provides an in-depth analysis of demographic trends, housing data, historical enrollment, and then projects future student populations within the district and each school boundary. So the report projects a fluctuating trend in overall enrollment for the school district over the next decade. Short-term projections indicate small potential increases, but without new housing, the long-term forecasts suggest a small gradual decline in some of our student numbers. This report is available right now under district news and announcements on our website, so we would encourage the community to check that out. And then fourth, we'll be responsible and transparent with our community's resources. I'm just getting a lot of questions on federal funding. So federal funding makes up roughly 4% of our Worthington Schools budget and totals around $6.8 million a year. That funding is in 3 main buckets: special education, Title I, and the National School Lunch Program. For the current school year, we received $2.6 million for IDEA, that's special education, $2.3 million for our federal lunch subsidy, $1.3 million for Title I, $300,000 for Title IIA, $300,000 for some smaller groups like Title III, ESL, preschool, and Title IV, student enrichment. But it totals that $6.8 million. There is a misconception that the federal government funds special education. So according to our Ohio Department of Education's Maintenance of Effort Monitoring, Worthington schools spent $28.2 million on special education services out of state and local funds, in addition to the $2.6 million from the federal government. So in total, we spent roughly $30.8 million in special education services last year. Thus, over our 90% of our of our special education funding comes from state or local sources. So we appreciate the federal government's help with that, but when people think about, what happens with federal funds, please recognize that over 90% of special education funding comes from our state or local community. President Davis, that is my report.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Does anyone have any questions about the report? Information. I love about the vision support, for sure, absolutely. Okay, Treasurer's report, Mr. Cusick.
Thank you. First, I just want to provide some quick background on tonight's agenda item. We're requesting authority to file complaints against the auditor's value of certain properties. The properties on this list are not owner-occupied residential properties. Our policy is not to contest the value of residential owner-occupied properties. These are all properties used in a commercial endeavor that we believe are significantly undervalued. House Bill 126 was passed a few years ago that requires the board to formally adopt this, each one of these resolutions individually, and so that's why you're being asked to do so tonight. Secondly, I wanted to briefly discuss the state budget tonight. We're 3 hours into this meeting, so I'm not sure that is advantageous. I copied you all on some testimony I submitted for tomorrow's House hearing. I do think it's important that our public understands that Worthington is losing $2.2 million under this proposal. That's 10% of our state funding. Question is why? Ohio always has entered into this partnership concept to fund schools where we come up with an amount and then it's shared between the state and the local district. And that has gone on for quite some time. What's happened under the governor's proposal is sort of two things. The biggest thing is that we didn't index the cost to educate the pupil for inflation, right? So in 2025, we're using costs that were from 2022. Now, I would love to go back to 2022 for costs. I'm sure Tim Gehring would love to do that as well. But that's not reality. And so what is happening is we are appearing more wealthy while not taking into account the total cost. And so the state is funding less and less of the share of the education of Ohio's children. So in that partnership concept, you would think that 50% on average for the state would be the average when you take total state funding, right? Some districts are going to get more, some districts are going to get less. Under this proposal, the state share in total drops all the way down to 32.2%. That's less than a third of the cost to educate children is being borne by the state. And so that's how a growing school district like Worthington, right? We don't have empty desks. We have more kids, but we're losing 10%. So what's the solution? I think obviously we need to request that they index the cost for inflation. We're not living in 2022 right now. And certainly if we're going to have a working formula, we can't index one side and not the other. Some rhetoric I hear is that, well, this is a formula that practitioners, treasurers came up with. To be clear, we came up with a formula that indexed all components all the time, right? So that nobody envisioned this. But I also honestly don't believe that anybody envisioned one component going up 40%, right? No formula is going to work that way. So I think we need to look at off-ramps. We certainly need to look at a school like Worthington, who has more kids, shouldn't receive 10% less than we received last year. And so, as Trent mentioned on the responsible staffing plan, we're working hard to manage our levy and contain costs and get our millage back down to reasonable levy. But to be clear, $2.2 million loss translates into about 2/3 of a mil that we would then have to recover from local taxpayers at a time when property taxes are becoming more of a burden. So we're gonna work to try to get this thing better over the next several months. And I'm happy to answer any questions along the way if you guys get asked that, but that's kind of where we're at with the state budget. 3 hours and 1 minute in.
Thank you, TJ. Does anyone have any questions for TJ at this time?
I don't have a question. First, thanks for drafting and sending that. Obviously, it reflects the feeling of the board as well, so we appreciate that on behalf of the district. I did, to the board members, want to talk about what we might want to do in terms of how we represent our district in the budgeting process, but I don't know if do we want to save that for
So I was going to ask,
comments?
we are 3 hours and 4 minutes into this meeting. Does anyone need a break? Okay, go for it. So, I'm sorry. First, anyone have any questions for TJ before Stephanie moves on? And TJ, are you done with your report? Was that, okay.
Okay.
So moving on to boards, committee reports and announcements. Announce, Stephanie, go ahead.
Transitioning. So I did, I went to a webinar put on by the Fair School Funding Project on Friday, and then the second half of OSBA's today, because I have a job that I had to do something for. And so one of the things that they said in both of those in terms of the budget, obviously aligning with what TJ said, just in terms of where the shortfalls are coming. And it's a concern for, many districts across the state. But one of the things that they said was obviously submitting written testimony is an option, connecting with our lawmakers, another option. And then this is a case where they would advocate for drafting a resolution to be followed up by personal conversations. So I think my question is that something that we feel would be important to do as a board to raise our voice that way? And if so, how would we move forward with that?
When you say followed up with conversation with
our representatives or whomever. So their
Exactly.
recommendation was like any of these things in isolation are fine, but doing them in concert is the most effective way. They both orgs reinforce the idea that personal stories or stories about your district and how kids are impacted and things like that are obviously the strongest ways of communicating. I think it's important to, just talk about how it would impact our district and things like that. But the resolution obviously is still personal, but less personal than those conversations.
Okay. Any feedback to that? Stephanie's suggestion of a resolution.
I like the idea of a resolution, and I think it gives us something to share with our legislator or other legislators. We know from other districts that it's an easy one-page thing to share.
I agree.
So I like the idea, but I'm not a good writer.
I like the
I don't know if
idea
we could take that on.
of providing language to our legislators. Our senator and our, yes, and our representative to present, anyway, so. Nikki or Amber?
Yeah, I support it as well. I think that it is definitely a way to amplify. I also will second it's not it, right? It's not the silver bullet. It's something that we do in connection with additional conversations. And we'll echo again the gratitude for TJ for sending along those comments.
I think a resolution is good for like an official action from the board. I think that who did you send your letter to? The members of the finance committee or?
It was official testimony for the House
The
Education
testimony.
Committee, but I copied our individual, both House and Senate representatives on it.
So I think it might be worthwhile maybe, and this is when, we talk about who has the votes. And it's not our local reps. So I think reaching the members of the finance committee, reaching some of the other members specifically of the majority caucus, I think could be helpful. Like I said, the resolution is good, but it's
not
kind
the
of decorative.
Yeah, I don't think
It's-
these are the only, no, certainly.
Right.
So I do
Helps
have a
us reach
question.
out.
Yes, I do have a question about that. So I know the House hearings tomorrow. Am I correct in understanding there's a Senate hearing anticipated in March?
Typically, the House will,
Take the
the governor introduces the budget, the House kind of takes it and then sends something over to the Senate, and then they argue and eventually June 30th come to an agreement of some sort.
So I think.
The Senate's, they're meeting though, right?
I'm sure they are.
I think they're trying to escalate this one. I mean, whether or not that happens remains to be seen. But so I think another piece that I was thinking too is depending on what that butting of heads looks like and what comes out of the House, again, submitting testimony to the Senate as well would be an important step also.
I think throughout
I
the
agree.
process. I think this is something that's big enough that we make our voices heard throughout, so.
So Amber and I met with Representative Samani last week, and she talked about coming and speaking to us about the budget, the state's budget. So I think we could then have a conversation there too, she maybe could be helpful as to who we need to contact and reach out to. And again, also provide helpful language from our district specifically and just public education in general.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're thinking about not just our district losing money, but half of the districts, over half of districts are losing.
Yeah.
May I make a recommendation that if it's available, that she brings a member of the finance committee along with her, if there's someone who's willing to do that, just because they're the ones who are taking the lead on it. Not that she can't speak to the work that they're doing, but obviously that
It's not her committee.
It's not her committee, exactly.
Even the budget director on staff would be really the expert.
Okay.
I mean, it's the budget.
Yeah,
bill
the
is
budget
it's
director,
a
that's fine,
huge-
yeah. I mean, if there are other possible, and individuals who could.
Yeah, I don't remember her saying she would talk to the budget. I remember her saying that she would come for a tour. She was interested in maybe seeing the high schools.
Yeah, she also talked about
Did she?
budget, yeah. So I sent her dates for our meeting.
Yeah, I saw that.
And, but we can invite, OSBA encourages that, right? We don't necessarily have to just invite our legislators.
Yeah.
That are assigned to our district. Dr. Bowers.
But I was just gonna say, I think the sense that I'm getting when I talk with representatives, I talked with the lieutenant governor today, is that they don't all understand that a growing school district could be losing money. So I think the assumption, over 400 school districts in Ohio actually lost students last year. And so I think there's a general tenor that the state is funding school districts that are losing enrollment. And so I don't think that they understand how the system actually worked in many cases this time. And a growing school district could be losing 10% of their revenue. And so I think that's the very simple and super effective talking point to say, wait, growing school district losing 10%, which is a really significant drop in our revenue. Now, whether they fix it or not is a whole different conversation and with lots of moving parts and honestly winners and losers. I mean, but from a Worthington standpoint, again, I talked with the lieutenant governor. He said, well, you're growing, you guys will be fine. But that's not how it worked. So I just don't know that, with all the other things they have going on in the budget, they understand that that's what happened.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that 2/3 of districts are at the 20 mil floor. So when they're getting revenue from property growth where we are not.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference that is hard to understand for all of them, for anybody really in general. And so I would just offer up also, keep in mind that the property tax reform is probably coming at some fashion as well, potentially. And that's a bigger issue for us if things go south than the state budget.
Yeah.
But
I guess I threw the resolution out there as a thing. I feel pretty strongly that this is a thing where we need to make our voices heard. Not in a combative way, right? Like in a, hey, look at,
Informative.
right, look at, it's a story, right?
happened.
Yeah. Because we we're elected to, be stewards of district funds. So, I think we definitely need to do multiple steps. And if we start with a resolution, at least then we've kind of worked through our talking points and our story. And then, we can individually also reach out to different people to spread the net even wider.
So why don't I make the recommendation that, and we haven't done this historically, it's usually been someone on the board who said, I'll draft it. But there's no reason why we can't utilize our PR team, including our consultant, to take a look at what our key message points want to be, and draft something fairly succinct for us along those lines. So I think do you mind conveying that as part of the communications committee, that these would be the key points we would want to make, and seeing if they can draft one for us? Do you think that's appropriate? It's just a solution. It's just a suggestion, excuse me.
Yeah, Vicky's the chief storyteller, so she's the one who knows a lot of these personal stories that we tell here in the district and everything. So that would make sense, I think, to collaborate on something like that.
I'll share with you, the OSBA made the slides public, so and they were supposed to have the recording out by tomorrow, so I can send everybody those, and you can even maybe just flip through the slides. And
I was on there too.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. But no, it'd be good to see them.
Yeah.
Something else that I know we're kind of skipping around here, but I went to an OSBA session on Saturday, and they were talking a little bit about legislative outreach, and I mentioned something just about, breaching the majority caucus and, any ideas they had for a district like ours. And they were using Toledo as an example, and they said that Toledo schools actually invited Senator Brenner up and gave him a tour and talked to him, and it was just a anecdote, but that after that he no longer zeroed in and singled out Toledo as one of his talking points, because I guess previously he had, and that's why they reached out. So I don't know that he's done that with us. I haven't heard him do that with us. But that was just an idea. He's chair of the Senate Education Committee.
So I'm going to save my other updates because there's nothing time sensitive for our next meeting.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Does anyone else have a board update or announcement?
I will save mine also because they're probably just about the same as Stephanie's, because I've seen her so many times the past couple weeks.
Nothing time sensitive. We are nearing a.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it's fine. Like I said, I did go to that thing on Saturday. I have about 10 pages of notes here, but I can bring it up next time.
Amber, are there any bills or anything that need our immediate attention besides the budget?
I did go through them, so everything's being introduced. So it's just this flurry right now. So there's a ton of bills that are education related. Most of them are simply just kind of hearing, if they are getting any action, it's just sponsor testimony, first reading. There have been a couple that have had second hearings, 3. So I could go through those real quick, just because those are the ones that I guess have kind of moved the most. And this is just in the Senate, just Senate Bill 19. It's Senator Brenner's bill. He's a sponsor for it, and it's a math improvement plan.
Okay.
So it's moving. Senate Bill 2 is something to do with property taxation. Maybe that one's on TJ's radar, but it's Senator Reineke. It's in Senate Energy. I'm not quite clear on what that does. It's electric companies and property taxation, and you know what I'm talking about?
I think they're trying to change the valuation of electric property for generation. I don't know that we have electric generation property in our district.
Okay. And then just the third one that I scribbled down here real quick before we got in was just Senate Bill 50. It's had a second hearing too, and that's Senator Schaefer. It's in Workforce Development Committee. And that is related to students under the age of 16 and certification and work hours. Okay. I'm not sure what that means past that. That's just the notes I took.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
just 3 that are kind of moving, but I mean, nothing, it's still so early.
Yeah.
In the session.
Thanks.
The only not time sensitive thing, but definitely wanted to share was just about our meeting with Dr. Samani. And I said all I had to say about that. So, okay. Moving on. Actions recommended by the treasurer, Mr. Cusick.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the board approve the minutes from the February 10th meeting as presented in enclosure E1, please.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? Okay. TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the board approve the appropriations modifications listed in the agenda. These are cross-object transfers that net to zero in the general fund, please.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes. Motion carries. Actions recommended by the treasurer, new business.
Thank you. As mentioned earlier, I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the resolutions to file complaints against the valuation of real properties for tax year 24 as indicated in enclosures F1A through F1J, please.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to personnel consent agenda, Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. That's items G2 through G11. G2 through G11, please.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve items H1 and H2. H1 is the acceptance of the donations, and H2 is a senior remaining in the district. H1 and H2, please.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Now, Dr. Bowers screwed up my score sheet. Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes. Nice recovery.
Unintended. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H3. Item H3 is a resolution accepting a proposal from Prodigy for Phase 1 remodeling at the Worthington Operations Center as indicated in H3. Just a second to speak about this. When we purchased the building, we knew that we would have a budget for remodeling. You're going to see a couple phases come forward. This is phase 1 of that remodel, but we will be within the budget that we designated for that remodel. And so this is that first one, and then it'll be about a month, 6 weeks before we see phase 2. But we're going to start moving quickly. While it's taken us a while to make sure our plans are within budget, we feel good about it, have a contractor ready to go. And so this is phase 1 of that for that operations building.
Excellent. So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes. Okay. Item I, actions recommended by the Board of Education. May I please have a motion to adopt the special education resolution as required annually by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Do you have any further questions? Okay. TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Are there any requests, questions, concerns from the board? Okay. Looking at calendar, our next meeting is March 10th at 6:30. We will get an update on the Master's Facilities Plan Phase 2. That'll be exciting. Then we will take a bit of a break and have a meeting on April 14th where we will have a portrait into practice update. Then April 28th, our meeting will be about student behavior and mental health update. The only thing I wanted to say on the calendar really fast before we adjourn is about our next work session. And I gathered the feedback that I got from all of you and landed on 3 dates in the afternoon. I'm proposing from 1 to 4.
Okay.
So those dates are March 12th, March 13th, and March 17th.
March
17th.
7th, okay.
This is in the evening?
1 to 4.
1 to 4.
1 to 4, oh. March 12th
March 13th,
and 17th.
March 17th.
Are we weighing in or emailing you?
No, you can write it down and you can email it.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Because it's 10 o'clock.
And you said 1 to 4, correct?
1 to 4.
Thank you.
All right, may I please have a motion to adjourn? You guys are troopers.
So moved.
Second. Sorry.
TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.